Good evening. We're going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. It's 6:06 p.m. and this is our regular board meeting for Thursday, September 9th, 2021. Dr. Thomas, if you would conduct roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis,
Here.
Ms. Gallagher,
Here.
Mrs. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Dr. Dykeman, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Gant,
Here.
Attorney Hull,
Here.
and Dr. Maddox.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum. We'll move forward to item 1.3, and this is our silent meditation and then our Pledge of Allegiance. We'll start with a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. And now if you would, please join us in our Pledge of Allegiance. A pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Moving forward to number 2 on our agenda. These are our recognition and awards. Dr. Thomas.
Yes, ma'am. We have Dr. Porter here for our recognitions for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Dr. Gant, board members, for our recognitions this month, we have a surprise. For not only you, it'll be just revealing, if you will, but we'll have a surprise for one of our employees in the school district. And for that surprise, I'd like to call up our principal at Hillsman Middle School, Principal Cappy Douglas. She was hiding from me. There she is. Principal Douglas.
Hello, everyone. All right. So, Mr. Watkins! Mr. Watkins is the CCSD Employee of the Month. Okay. Okay. For 12 years, Mr. Randall Watkins has been a dedicated and faithful employee of CCSD. And we are super excited that he was selected as the Employee of the Month. Mr. Watkins is an extraordinary teacher because he always goes the extra mile to support staff, inspire positivity, and to uplift students. He is considerate, he is compassionate, and he is the consummate professional. Mr. Watkins is a master teacher because he reaches the heart before he teaches the mind. He is a master teacher because he authentically seeks to cultivate, empower, and meet the holistic needs of the students he serves. With deliberate intention, I use the word serve because Mr. Watkins fully embodies the principles of servant leadership. He's an active listener with the goal of seeking to understand. He constantly and consistently and continually shows empathy. He focuses on healing, creating a curative environment for our students, self-awareness, persuasion for the sole purpose of moving us towards improvement and to be better and to be good. Foresight, stewardship, which focuses on promoting the well-being for each person within an organization. Every day, Mr. Watkins arrives ready to work, ready to serve, and ready to build a community that loves, that honors, and inspires students and staff alike. He is our child whisperer, our model staff member, and a phenomenal member of the Hillsman and CCSD family. Thank you, Mr. Watkins, for representing our profession with unyielding dignity, compassion, and honor. Mr. Watkins, you make us better every day.
You take your mask off.
No, I can't talk that. I do want to thank Miss Douglas. She pushes me to reach my full potential. Ever since she entered the doors of Hillsville Middle School, she has definitely made me a better employee and challenges me each and every day. You can't do anything but work at 100% miles per hour for Miss Douglas. Um, I do want to acknowledge several close friends and family members that are here. So I thank everyone for making me better. And I do thank the Athens Clark County community. I thank all the board members. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. The parents that are here, you're phenomenal. You're great. Thank you for your support. So I can't thank each and every one of you enough. Thanks.
No, hold on. So he didn't know why he was coming tonight. His wife did, though. And he also doesn't know this probably, but with the recognition comes a $250 cash award from the Foundation for Excellence and hundreds of dollars, almost $1,000 worth of stuff from our local supporters and our local businesses here through the Athens Chamber of Commerce. So congratulations and keep up the good work. Appreciate it. Yes, he's got more.
I need to thank my wife first and foremost. Thank you. She is such an amazing and great supporter. She's the one that introduced me to education. So I want to acknowledge her first and foremost. And I see my mom. Thanks. She raised me.
Congratulations. Dr. Thomas, I think that's a nice way to wrap up our recognitions for this month. Thank you.
Yes, I felt like we should just say amen after after Miss Douglas. That was wonderful, and it made me almost want to go back to middle school and be a middle school student again, just to be in his class. So thank you. Well done. Thank you, Miss Douglas. That was excellent. We appreciate what you do every day for our students as well as what Mr. Watkins does. So thank you. Yes.
That is awesome. I got very excited. I think
Me
all of us
too.
did. So congratulations again. We will move forward with item 3 on our agenda, and that is amending or adopting the agenda before us.
Yes, ma'am. I was going to ask for an amendment, but Ms. Palmer shared with me that we fixed it at the original time, that we did not have to do it.
Okay.
So
okay.
I'll just bring it up in my report.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Sounds good. All right. Motion to amend. Oh, okay. Okay.
Motion to adopt the agenda as prepared.
Okay. So Ms. Davis made a motion. Mr. Davis seconded it. Any further discussion or questions? All right, all in favor of adopting the agenda before us, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstaining? Okay, we'll move forward with the agenda that's printed before us. And we are at item 4, and these are our public comments. And so I will read the order. And Dr. Yeager, I don't have this pulled up, but the policy that guides us, I'm sorry. But let me read the order while Dr. Yeager helps me, please, and finds that so that I can remind us of how we go about our public comments. We have Kristen Morales, Marshall Massey Sandoval, Tawanda Colbert, Burtis Downs, Harry Buford. I'm sorry? Bufford, thank you. Thank you. Melissa Link, Rick Lemire, Laura Miriam Mccalvin, Tommy Valentine, Jennifer Lewis, Melvin Hayes, and Fred Smith. That's okay. I'll summarize our, so you have 3 minutes for public comment and of course, personal attacks will not be tolerated. You will be asked to take your seat if there are personal attacks. And I'm summarizing our policy here. And board members will not reply directly to any of the public comments. And this is found, just for your information, in our policy BCBI. Okay, for your reference. Okay, thank you. That's okay. Kristen Morales.
Hi, my name is Chris. Do I need to say my address, or you all have that? Okay, all right, sorry. Thank you for your service to the community. I wanted to speak this evening about the West Broad School site. I understand the tensions and the tug of wars that have taken place over this property for years. And I also understand the constraints of the project that relate to both its use as an early learning center and through the funding appropriated for the project. None of these have given the project sure footing. So when you add in the layer of its value as a historic property, it makes the future of this project clear as mud. I wanted to let you know that I support whatever decision you all come to tonight. I know any decision has its pluses and minuses, and I understand all the reasonings behind them. What I did want to say tonight, though, was that it didn't have to be this way. The red flag should have been raised months ago when the original historic preservation professional on the project resigned. I talked to her not long ago, and she told me, and I quote, "I felt they were not approaching this in a very preservation-oriented way." When I told her about the plan to demolish the Campbell Street building, she told me, quote, "This is very concerning. It's a shame and unnecessary." What I find particularly striking about the two-building plan you're looking at today is that it's essentially what was proposed in 2018. I remember when that plan first dropped and everyone freaked. There was the garden and the historic buildings and the arguments over the proposed uses. People were unhappy, and yet here we are, back to essentially the exact same plan as what everyone winced at 3 years ago. What have we been doing this whole time? And why the about face? In a July 19th email to Dr. Thomas, Mr. Gilbreth lobbied for the two-building plan. He wrote the plan is better because it won't, quote, utilize an inefficient building just to save a building. About a week later, Mr. Gilbreth then emailed the architect on the project to tell them, quote, "We are not keeping the two-story Campbell Lane building." Friends, this project was a done deal before it even started. Our incredibly historic equalization school will be turned into rubble in the name of efficiency and cost savings. You can thank Mr. Gilbreth for putting us all in this awkward position tonight. So allow me to raise a new red flag, because CCSD has some wonderfully historic buildings still in its portfolio. Although I fear that the way things are going, we'll lose them in the name of efficiency as well. Let's take the turn-of-the-century house that remains on the property CCSD just purchased from Piedmont College. Yeah, Mr. Gilbreth wants to turn that into a parking lot. But he says he wants to move the house, which honestly is barely preservation and really shows a lack of imagination and ingenuity. Or what about the old Gaines School on the east side? Yeah, we can probably kiss that one goodbye too. And Clark Middle wasn't even a conversation. So I guess I'm here tonight to just express my dismay and the lack of understanding and thought that the facilities office has given to the portfolio of our historic properties that CCSD has. Let's not lose any more historic structures. We need a more open process. We need to give preservationists a legitimate seat at the table when historic buildings are involved in construction plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Marshall Massey Sandoval.
Do you see Marshall?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Yep, we'll come back. Okay. Tawanda Colbert.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all?
Good.
I'm here to speak on behalf of Cedar Shores High School concerning the field house. Okay. It was said that it was trying to take away the field house for Cedar Shores. So, okay, so everybody in here is supposed to be for kids. And I feel like, why take away something that was already in budget in the first place for us to have? I have a son that goes there with me being an alumni. I feel like Do y'all understand how it'll make the kids feel with smiles on their faces if they will have a field house? That's something that was already in agreement. I think that every school should be treated fairly. A lot of things that goes on at Clark Central, like they have the new turf, they have bleachers and all of that. And I feel like each school should be treated fairly. I don't think it's fair that the field house for Cedar Shows is trying to be taken away when it was already in budget in the first place. I think that it should still go on. I think that it will give the kids something to look forward to. It'll give them pride in their school. It'll make them happy to, just go to school and they see like, okay, so we're being treated fairly, we're being treated equally. We get to have some of the same things that the other school has, because a lot of things that goes on at Clark Cedar Shows, everybody know they look at us as a bad school, and a lot of things that are displayed will be displayed quicker than it would be at Clark Central. So I feel like we should, as a whole, as people that are for the kids, should go ahead and let this happen to give the kids something to look forward to, give them a sense of pride in their school. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Ms. Sandoval, are you? Okay, hold on one second. Yep, Ms. Sandoval, you can go ahead and come, and then Mr. Bird is down.
Thank you for making that adjustment for me. Am I to give my address as well? Okay.
But can you speak
Okay.
into the mic a little bit
Yes.
more?
Yes, my name is Marshall Massey Sandoval, and I live at 180 Big Oak Circle in Athens, Georgia. I'm the wife of a Cedar Shows alum, a mother of a Cedar Shows dual enrollment student who is displayed on the wall behind me. And I'm a grandparent to a Cedar Shows junior. I'm here tonight to speak on the field house at Cedar Shows High School. The field house at Cedar Shows High School is something that has been budgeted and promised to the Cedar Shows. I feel that it would be a great injustice not only to Cedar Shows High School and Cedar Shows High School community, but also to the students who have long awaited for this venture to happen. To take the money that has been allocated to this project and move it to another project would not only cause students who will soon be graduating not to partake in the use of this field house, but it would also cause students to feel that they are being slighted because, as we all know, more resources are being provided to the west side of Athens than the east side. And having this field house can instill some school pride in the community, and not just for current students, but for alum and those who support Cedar Shows, and not just be another broken promise. I understand that the West Broad School has deadlines, and then this money could assist them in meeting those deadlines. However, it is about being fair and being just. Using this money where it is allocated and give Cedar Shows High School a new field house that they have not only promised, but they will deserve. You may only view it as a field house, but to the Cedar Shows family, it is a dream fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you. Bird is down, and next is Harry Bufford.
I'm sorry, I'm not used to being out in public. I guess I rushed the stage there and I didn't mean to. I thought somebody was skipping. Okay, so hi, it's good to be back. I haven't seen all of y'all, some ever. I'm not used to in-person anything, but y'all have a tough job. We've always known that. Dr. Thomas and her team all have a tough job. I'm here, one of the advantages, can I take my mask off at this point to talk? Okay.
Can you speak in the mic or a little bit louder?
Yeah, I'll certainly do that. My posture won't be great. One of the nice things about getting old is you have some stories that might be relevant. And I have a few stories right now that happen in this town. Some involve the district, a lot of them don't. But I'll take you back about 3 decades, a little more than 30 years ago. We had this false choice. That's going to be my theme. But there was this false choice. We can either have a world-class civic center that any orchestra would be proud to play in with a proper auditorium and meeting space and stuff that you can do, or we can have a fire hall. And it was a bloody, ugly, it was a terrible time to be the president of what was then called, terrible name, Athens Clark Heritage Foundation, now Historic Athens. And I was a lot younger, 32 years ago, but it was a really tough battle. But you know what? At the end of the day, a few people with power figured out a way to do it with architects, with construction people, where the fire hall became sort of the centerpiece of the Classic Center. And you know what? It's still a world-class civic center that Athens is proud of, that fully functions. The fire hall didn't hold it back from that. That was a choice that was given to many, many boards and many, many committees and people making that decision. It was a really hard decision, and kind of it worked out. Second one goes back 20 years, and that was in neighborhood right near the Piedmont Hospital. Y'all may remember this, but it was right around the turn of the century. And that one, the hospital planned to take down 57 houses in a middle-class neighborhood. We have an issue with affordable housing in Athens and housing that isn't overpriced. And it was 57 houses all the way down to Belvoir Street, down King Avenue. And it was going to be a really massive undertaking, and it was going to spread the hospital out. And the choice was given, either we can have a world-class hospital, people will go for heart surgeries and brain surgeries, or we can maintain these houses. Ended up not being true. The hospital got the message loud and clear. They need to go up, not spread out. They took 7 houses, not 57. And again, it was another false choice. The third example I would give, I'm going to skip because I've only got 40 seconds left. But I'm just glad that whoever was on school board, when it was being decided whether or not this building would be preserved and maintained, Clark Central, the facade of Clark Central, okay, it's not as functional as it once was, but I think where you have historic buildings that really mean something to the community, this was the old black high school, that was the old white high school. They merged way too long, a generation after Brown versus Board. But whoever made those decisions, we teach our kids where there's a will, there's a way. These are really smart architects. These are really smart planners and professionals. Work with them. Tell them what you want. They'll do it. Thank you.
It's all yours. We don't want it, I promise you.
Thank you.
Why is it so low?
Okay. So we have Mr. Harry Bufford and then Melissa Link.
I'll step over this way. It's definitely my pleasure to be here speaking tonight. And before I speak, and Melvin told me 3 minutes going to go by quick, and he knows me. Found out tonight, Melvin and I was classmates. The gentleman just spoke about first year integration. We both was here. I remember Miss Gay playing the piano as we came in. Always enjoyed that. Longtime member, East Side family, taught at Hillsman 18 plus years. Coached at Sears Shows many, many years. Congratulations to Mr. Watkins, known his family forever. Great family, great teacher over there. Keep up good work. Young man standing back here ran cross country for me. Tom, he gave me one of these handouts and said, I'm speaking for Sears Shows. And that's why I'm here tonight. And that's why I'm here tonight. And I don't think I could do as good a job as the 2 ladies already spoke, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to speak on equity between Cedar and Clark athletic fields. And we got to understand there's a perception on the east side. You know, it's how people perceive things. Sometimes you perceive things as true, sometimes it's not true. But the perception is that Cedar gets slighted. You know, maybe I was part of it during my coaching years. I don't know. But I'm here to speak about, and I got the numbers. I've been blessed to receive an email from A.D. Thomas, who couldn't be here tonight because he's coaching a JV volleyball game in Flowery Branch. That's another issue for another night. He shouldn't be coaching a JV volleyball team. But maybe I'll come speak on that on another night. But I got the figures from John Gilbert, and just going to throw some of these figures out. The original Splash 5, it was allocated $2.5 million for both high schools and the middle schools. Then Dr. Means said, no, we're going to spend $4 million on the 2 high schools, give them both tracks, new tracks, and the turf fields. Turf fields are definitely the way to go. I love what I've seen at Clark. I love that turf field. I love the track, 8 lanes. That's what we need in Athens. You can't host a major event without 8 lanes now. So fantastic job on that. Drico, excuse me, I taught Drico, so I'm still used to calling people by their first names. A.D. Thomas told me a phone call today. There was a meeting between both athletic directors, Dr. Means, and board members, talking about what to do with the money. And he said that at that time it was stated, we don't want the turf field right now. We want the field house. Ooh, that went by quick. Well, equity, talking about equity. Doggone it. Clark Central budget, they end up $5 million. Right now we're at 800,000. It was promised we could have a field house. It's time to live up that promise. Because what do we teach in education? It's character. And thank you for your time. Character. Live up to your promises. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Melissa Link and Rick Lemire.
Move this down. Hey, y'all. I want to thank you all for your service in these particularly calamitous times. And I want to remind you that I sent a letter back in May, I believe, about the West Broad building. I'm the commissioner for this district, which includes West Broad and this building. And I just want to relay to you the lessons that that building has taught me. And this being a school district and a school building, this is how I learned about equalization era and how I learned that this community delayed as much as possible the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education and assured that Black and white students were kept separate as long as possible, well into the 70s after I was born. So I believe that that building can remain a testament to that history, and we can learn lessons from it. Black history in this community has been systematically erased. There were beautiful multi-story Black-built and Black-owned buildings downtown that have been destroyed, and they were destroyed in reaction to desegregation in an attempt to erase that history of Black prosperity. I believe we need to maintain this history so future generations can learn it. And, you know, me, someone who considers myself an amateur historian who didn't even know about this stuff, but learned about it through this building, I believe that there are so many other people that can learn that too. And I think that our children can learn. And you know, just the very presence of that building can be maintained. So I want to encourage y'all to save it. I also want to speak briefly about COVID and vaccinations, and I want to encourage y'all to pass a vaccine mandate. We did this in the Athens Clarke County government last week. The Pfizer vaccine is approved by the FDA for children over 16. So I do want to encourage you to do that. Things are not looking good in this community. UGA is carrying on as usual. As someone who works for UGA, I know the fear and I know the recklessness that abounds on campus and is about to get worse this weekend. So I believe that, you know, this entity that has been quite sane throughout this madness, especially compared to some of our neighboring communities, I want to encourage you to take those further steps as well. And please save that Campbell Lane building. It's a really important structure. And I think it can speak a lot to our community and how we value the history of African American culture in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Lemire, and after that is Laura Miriam Mccalvin.
Thank you for the mighty struggle with my last name. It's actually Lemire, but thank you very much. I'll be brief. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of saving the Campbell building. I understand it's not necessarily suitable as it is for the use that's intended, but a couple things. One is it's folly to eradicate the past just because it's not consistent with what we consider useful or suitable for today's world. It's a totally different thing. And secondly, as we start to reckon with the ugly parts of our past, the conversation is frequently about tearing down monuments or moving them to the edge of town or removing names or things like that of the people who contributed to that past. This building gives you an opportunity to advance and tell the story and to learn to reckon with our past in a positive manner. Save the building, make it work for something new, but don't take it down. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak it, and I highly encourage you to please save the building, make it work, but do something with it, and rather than tear it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Miriam Mccalvin. Next is Tommy Valentine.
Good evening. I'm going to read so that I can say exactly what I want to say. My name is Laura Miriam Mccalvin, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I have 5 children, a 17-year-old foster son working on his GED, a 4th grader who receives special education services at Barrow Elementary, a son in pre-K, and a toddler and baby at home. I was born and raised in Athens and love that my children are able to grow up here as well. I am serving my 3rd year on the LSGT at Barrow, and I'm also on the PTA Executive Board this year. From school involvement to fostering, I care about and I'm invested in my community. I am here today to simply ask that we remain in person and allow our teachers and staff to do what they love at every school across the district. After 18 months of vacillating between virtual and in-person instruction, I have seen the toll that it has taken on my son and other children. Our children are behind academically, and the only way to help them move forward is to maintain in-person instruction with all resources and staff devoted to their education. I understand that some families feel more comfortable with virtual instruction, and I hope that a resource other than our CCSD teachers and staff, such as proximity learning, can be provided for these families. More than ever, our kids need as much support as possible in their physical classrooms, and I do not think it is appropriate to pull staff away from in-person instruction to provide virtual instruction. The iReady testing we just completed made it very clear that CCSD has to make every effort to keep our students in person this year. I hope that board members and district staff are ready to think creatively to find solutions that keep our kids safe and in the classroom. I hope that closing our schools for virtual instruction is the absolute last resort and that you consider every option before doing so. I hope that when you make decisions, you remember that the majority of CCSD families want to be in person and are depending on you to make that happen. I hope that your decisions are based on best practices, research, and scientific evidence, and not on the fickle and sometimes volatile views presented on social media. I believe that we can truly make CCSD better every day by putting our students first and making every effort to keep them in the classroom. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Tommy Valentine. Next is, after Tommy, is Jennifer Lewis.
Thank you. Before I get started today, I want to apologize in advance. I am certain I'll run out of time before I run out of things to say, just as Coach Bufford did, and that's because he coached us in cross country. If I run short distance or sprints, I might be better at going quick. But I wanted to start tonight by saying thank you to everyone in this room. I care about a lot of you, and I know you're all trying to do what's right, and I can tell that. Your eyes are up. You're not tuned out. You came in with open minds. And that matters, regardless of how you vote. I wanted to start today by pointing out something that is recent history, to me at least. My first time speaking as an activist was 20 years ago this year. And it was back when I used to wear this. It was back when I used to wear my Cedar Shoals jacket. And I came because of delayed construction costs. I came because I was out of Cedar Shoals that they wouldn't finish on time, and they kept treating us like the least important school in the area. I learned a lot at Cedar, including from that experience. I also learned a lot from our track coach when he was our history professor, history teacher, Coach Edmonds. One of the things he taught us about is what's called sharecropper mentality. And it's where they take a bunch of marginalized people and they pit them against one another, and they convince them that neither of them can have good things because there's not enough good things left. Y'all, that is what has happened here tonight. I can say with confidence from experience, I don't think I'm gonna have time to read it, but if I do, there's a paragraph in here from a book on preservation about how common tonight's situation is. As you can see in the handouts, information has been suppressed. It's been given to you in misleading chunks. Preservation planners have been suggested that they should keep in their lane. The reports they're writing aren't getting to you. Instead, 4 years ago, there was a plan to do what tonight is being called the two buildings solution. And I got a call from some of the top African-American preservationists in the country, including one here in the state of Georgia, saying that that's insufficient and not respectful to the history of that site. Well, we're back here again. And after discussions and delays and suppression and misleading data, we're being forced into a corner where once again, you don't have the information you need to make an educated decision about the choice between option A and option B. I want to say as I close here that there's a very good chance that you approve option A, the bulldozers come out, the grant is still not funded because construction supplies are over budget and behind because of COVID. You have an empty lot that cannot be brought back to life and a grant that isn't there for this school. We all know better, we care better. I ask you to either support the three building solution or vote to delay until you have all the information you need. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Lewis. Next is Melvin Hayes.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Lewis. I'm on the Board of Historic Athens, and I'm a parent of a CCSD student, so I value the work that you do. I also remember how hard it was to find pre-K childcare 14 years ago, so I am excited about the Early Learning Center that will be on this historic West Broad site. I don't envy the decision you were tasked to make, especially since plans have already been submitted to move forward with demolishing the Campbell Lane building before the board had seen the recommendations from the preservation planner or the cost estimate for rehabilitation. There seem to be outstanding questions. How does the original $10 million price tag compare to other school rehabs we have done? Could it be that even the two building plan will dip into the funds needed for the Cedar Shoals field house and keeping the Campbell Lane building will get the blame? What is the preservation approach for the Minor Street building? Is it being gutted or are original elements being kept, which is a cost savings? As CCSD are stewards of the largest collection of historic community buildings in Athens, expertise in historic buildings should have a seat at the table from the beginning, in addition to contractors, land planners, and education specialists. An open and transparent process would have allowed for collaborative planning that felt genuine rather than a token inclusion late in the game. We may have come to the conclusion that some of the site would need to be sacrificed, but without the contention. I believe that the best argument for revitalizing the historic buildings of the West Broad School campus is that CCSD has already led the way in showcasing what a historic school of Black excellence can become. We're standing in another equalization school that no longer resembles its original floor plan, so one must assume that there is a way to modify steel-framed walls of Campbell Lane and achieve the desired larger classroom sizes. If saving the Campbell Lane building becomes part of the construction program the board recommends, then perhaps more creative and cost-saving measures will be pursued. This building was given a preservation award, not so much for its adherence to preservation construction standards, but for the process in which the district worked with citizen advocates who lobbied for decades for the physical preservation of a place that held strong memories and its creative adaptation to educate future generations. We know it can be done because we've already done it. A plaque is not a substitute for a place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes, and then Mr. Fred Smith.
Good evening. My name is Melvin Hayes. Let me pull my speech out of my pocket and share with you all what's going on. Let's talk about broken promises. Broken promises. I want you to think about broken promises. I've been in Athens, Clark County, 65 years. I was educated here. My children attended Cleveland Road. I spent 20 years at Cleveland Road. Okay, I have two daughters in college, one at Georgia Southern and one at Augusta University. I have 6 girls. With that being said, and I'm the founder of a youth association, I'm standing before you today to talk a little bit about broken promises, about access to fields to make our children more, say, in a safe environment. Let's talk about what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the policies that the board has put in place to hold children back from having access to some of these beautiful facilities that we're talking about building. We're talking about the schools. Clark Central has a beautiful facility. The lack of Cedar Shows having a beautiful facility. Broken promises. Broken promises. I'm here today to ask you to change the policy on the field, which are the policy that you have on field facility uses policies. I think it's our line. We have not had a youth football opening day in Athens, Clark County in 6 years. We had one 2 weeks ago, and it cost us 60% of our annual budget just by holding a football game in these facilities here in Athens, Clark County. We can't afford to continue to operate our youth associations if we're going to be overcharged on our facilities. And we need to revisit the policies. Those policies were not offered to the public. There were some changes made to those policies. I know the director has to go through the policies. I ask you, revisit those policies, put some waivers in place so our children can enjoy these facilities that we put monies in. See the shows. Please put them priority, because when you make broken promises, I don't know many of you as a father, I'm gonna give you one quick story. I don't have it. When I see people promise their children that they're gonna be there for Christmas, and they're looking for that promise, and that dad never shows up. They promise that kid that I'm gonna give them a pair of shoes, and they never shows up. You promise Cedar Shows a facility that will be state of the art, and now we're reneging on that. Let's make sure that when we make promises, that we do not policy our children out of access to facilities that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fred Smith.
Good afternoon. It's a little hot. Reclaiming my time. All right. Yeah, I guess so. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, President Gant, other members of the board, Superintendent Thomas. I'm here today too to talk about history and the importance of history. As we all know, whether we admit it or not, African-American people, African-American institutions and buildings are devalued. They're not viewed as significant as others buildings and institutions. And the Campbell Lane building should be safe. I had an opportunity this weekend to go down to Savannah and visit Beach Institute. And when these slaves were free in the 1860s, mid-1860s, the first schools for African Americans were Freedom Bureau schools. The Freedom Bureau School for Savannah still stands, Beach Institute. Knox Institute, which was built a year later in Athens, Clark County, has been long destroyed. 20 years after Knox was built, the first public school for African American was built on Baxter Street. That school no longer stands. That school also, that building has another significant, or had another significant. Now there's a piece of parlor there, but it had another significance. It also was the place for the first public Black college in the state of Georgia. Okay, there's no marker, nothing there, all gone. And now that's just the history of our schools. Only one school, and we mentioned it here, that we're standing in that was formerly Black that has been saved. Great funds and been spent saving Chase, Barra, Athens High, which is now Clark Central, and other formerly white schools, whereas all the other Black schools are either been destroyed, like Lyons and the East Athens School that were over on Oak Street. The only thing that remains there is part of the foundation, and Lyons, which was named for the first school in Athens, named for a Black man. Of course, it's gone as well. My time running out quickly, but CAMA is an important building. It speaks to an important time in our history, a very special time. Many of the people who inspired us, who brought us to and brought me to where I am, and others came through schools that was built in the 50s and 60s as part of what I call the Brown versus Board education legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, thank you for all of you who shared your public comments and thoughts. We'll move forward to item 5. And the only reminder or only thing I will say is that there have been some changes that I will follow up with about that superintendent advisory committee and being able to go through the results of the survey. But I am going to, Mr. Davis, if I could speak with you maybe after we leave, and I can sort of update you, and then I'll send something out to the board. And also, I asked last week that you save the date for our retreat. And so I'm circling back around to that to see if that 29th date that we had heard from everyone, bless you, works. And we would like to do the retreat on one day, actually. That would save on costs as well, because this will be in person. And so I wanted to come back to you and ask you about the 29th. We will need at least 6 hours to go through the entire assessment. So wanted to know if 2 until 9 p.m. would work for the board on the 29th. Yes. This was, and I got these dates from what you all replied to. Ms. Palmer sent out a poll, and in that poll, there were different responses about what worked, what times worked, and what times didn't.
I blocked off the evening, but not 2 o'clock.
Okay. And what's the earliest, Dr. Yeager, that you can?
I could probably start 4 or 4:30.
Okay. Was there any, Ms. Gallagher, did you say? Okay. Anyone else?
Did you just, I could start at 4.
Okay. And so what I would recommend we do, because we do need to go ahead and have it happen, is that we do from 2 until 9, and we'll reserve that first hour for like team building and just sort of taking care of any housekeeping things. And then we'll start at 3, and I can notify our GSBA facilitators that 2 people, the time that you all will be able to make it, and then we can make up that time. I think there are certain steps that we can take so we can be sure that it still counts for whole board training, so long as you're able to join us.
So do you have quorum? Because
What was that, Ms. Davis?
you have quorum without You can go ahead and do it on the 29th is what you're saying, from 2 to 9. Okay.
Are you, is that a date that you're unavailable as well?
I'll have to check to see if I can change an appointment. It's a doctor's appointment, but if I can change it, I'll be okay. If not, I'll be at my doctor's appointment.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's been a little bit difficult. I've tried to get a date that works for everyone. And so that's the reason that we had Ms. Palmer send it out, and some times that work for most of us. And
I can probably get here by 4, so.
okay,
Can we not do 4 to 10?
I'm open if that works for, if you all are okay with being here until 10. You're fine with you? Okay, Ms. Gallagher, we'll ask Ms. Okay, Ms. Davis, 4 to 10. Yeah, okay. Okay, Dr. Thomas, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, all right. So lock that in. I will reach back out to Julie and Sam, and this will be in person. So we will be here. All right, and that's it for the items that I had. We'll move forward to item 6. Dr. Thomas.
I have very short report. The one item that I do have, and this was already covered in our August 19th minutes when we had our action to approve the emergency paid sick leave. You all did give authority for me to extend that if necessary. And I didn't realize that, Dr. Gant, when I was speaking with you earlier. Ms. Palmer brought that to my attention. So it is our recommendation that we extend that just until October 15th, so just 2 additional weeks. And the reason being, we do not have another board meeting prior to that time. And I know that there was some discussion, wanted to be some discussion around parameters for that leave. But this is our last board meeting before September 30th. And if we extend it for 2 weeks until October 15th, that would allow us our next work session where we can have that discussion in October. And so we could talk at the work session and then take action if the board decides to do so at the regular meeting. So I am going to, so according to our last vote, I could just do that extension and notify you. So we will consider this notification, and we will extend to the 15th. And that way, if policy committee wants to bring that up, that gives us 2 meetings to take action on that. And that is all that I have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move forward to item 7. These are our presentations and discussions. And just as a reminder, these 2 were moved from last week's work session. So generally we would like to have this done at work sessions, but last week our work session was pretty packed. And so Dr. Thomas asked to move it to tonight. The first presentation and discussion is on strategic priority 1, and this is a student achievement update. And then the next one is strategic priority number 3, climate and culture.
And Dr. Gant, we will keep these to about 10 to 15 minutes. If we have a lot of questions, I would ask that we save those and you can email those to us, and Mr. Gaskins and Dr. Watley can get that information out, because it is not meant to extend the meeting significantly, but just to give update information, and then we're happy to answer any questions in writing. Yes.
There is no PowerPoint or anything associated with this item. Were you going to give us this PowerPoint to see? Okay.
Ms. Palmer,
Yes, we'll make sure you have a copy of the PowerPoint. And thank you, Dr. Gann and Dr. Thomas. And I just wanted to make a note that this would be one of at least 3 strategic plan goal number 1 updates that we will do throughout the year. It is still early in the year as it relates to student achievement. So we wanted to share with you the information that we have, but we will have more information in January and towards the end of the year that we would also share with the board. So the topics that we will review, first we will review strategic plan goal number 1 and its objectives. We will share with you all our enrollment and class size. We have our current reading and mathematics achievement data for kindergarten through 8th grade students. We will talk about an initiative that we are implementing this year called Strategic Support Circles, and then we'll talk about next steps and updates that we'll provide you in our next update of strategic goal number 1. So just to remind you, we have 3 objectives related to this goal. The first is to increase the number of students who demonstrate progress as measured by student growth percentiles, also known as SGPs on state and district ELA and mathematic assessments. So I underline district. We will be using our district SGPs this year. The state informed us last month that they will not have SGPs as a state, but we still have the capability to determine SGPs as a district. Objective 1.2, ensure 90% of or more of 8th grade students will be high school ready. And then objective 1.3, ensure 100% of high school graduates are college and career ready. So visiting enrollment, as it relates to Office of Early Learning, for our Early Head Start, we have 64 of 64 seats filled in our Early Head Start program. In Head Start, we have 102 of 102 seats filled for Head Start. And in Pre-K, we have 666 of our 792 seats filled for our Pre-K. We have 3 waiting lists. One is our Early Head Start waiting list that has 97 students on the waiting list. In our Head Start program, we have 36 students on our waiting list. Pre-K does not have a waiting list. We do maintain a waiting list for families. We have enough room in our district for every student that wants to attend Pre-K. They can attend Pre-K. However, some families would like to attend Pre-K where their older children are also in school, and sometimes there's not room. So those students would be on that school's waiting list because their preference is to have that child attend with their other siblings, although we do have space for them at other locations. As it relates to our elementary enrollment, we have 6,322 students. Mr. Davis, we thought about you when we made this slide because you often ask about our average class size, so we provided that information. So if you look on the left side, it shows the grade, kindergarten with a paraprofessional, 1st through 5th grade. In the middle is the average class size for our homerooms in elementary school. We have some homerooms as small as 13, and we have some as large as 22, but on average, these are the average class sizes in CCSD in that middle column, and then on that right column is the class size max for the state. In middle school, the class size average is in the middle, 28, 29, 18, 19, and 18. I know we have some middle school teachers that are at home saying those numbers seem really low. So we do have some classes that do have 26 students in their homeroom, 27 students in their homeroom. That is because of scheduling, but on average, we have 18, 19, and 18 class size homerooms at our middle school level, with the max size being 28. Some other information that we wanted to share with you, one of our strategic goals relates to our 8th grade students taking high school courses. So we are very proud of this data. These are our current high school courses that are offered in our middle schools: ag science, orchestra, French, algebra, physical science. That number is large because all of our 8th grade students are having access and opportunity to take physical science, Spanish 1. There's a transition to high school course, accelerated algebra and geometry, and as well as introduction to digital technology. So these courses are offered across our 4 middle schools, and we want to increase not just that number, but the offerings that we have for high school courses to our 8th grade students. The other information that we wanted to add is our virtual school enrollment. We currently have 145 students enrolled and our CCSD and/or our Georgia virtual program. The courses that we provide here in CCSD is Algebra 1, American Government, Biology. We are adding economics in the spring. We have lit at 9th grade and 10th grade, environmental science, geometry, health and personal fitness. Personal fitness is a class I would encourage all of our students to take online if they can. Physical science is also coming in the spring, as well as world history. So as we transition to where we are with our reading achievement, one of our parents just mentioned that we took iReady in August, and we have those results to share with you. iReady is a diagnostic assessment that assesses students on grade level progress in mathematics as well as ELA reading. And we give it 3 times a year. We give it at the beginning of the year, we give it in January, and then we also give it at the end of the year in May. So as it relates to our reading proficiency in grades K through 5. So this chart shows our kindergarten through 5th grade students. The green bar shows the students that are on level for this time of the year, the beginning of the year. The yellow shows if students are 1 year below grade level, and then the red shows if a student is 2 or more years below grade level. So you will notice at kindergarten, we have 20% of our students that are on level. In 1st grade, 14%, 2nd grade, 17%, grade 3, 30%, grade 4, 20%, and then grade 5, 23%. And then I will just add that at kindergarten, you will notice that either those kids are on level or 1 level below. That's because they are kindergartners that are starting the beginning of the year. We also have this information for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. At 6th grade, 23% are on level, 25% are on level, and 26% are on level. So we have also disaggregated this data for reading proficiency by subgroup for race. So you can see our American Indian Alaskan Native population is at 18%. Our Asian population is at 52%. Black and African American at 9%. White at 52%. And our Hispanic and Latino at 16% for reading. I think I might have skipped. No, that's correct. As we look at the math achievement, these slides are organized in a similar way. So for math proficiency for grades K through 5, at kindergarten, 15% on level, grade 1, 9% on level, grade 2, 10% on level, grade 3, 12% on level, grade 4, 11% on level, and grade 5, 16% on level. In 6th grade, it's 16%. Grade 7, it is 16% as well, and grade 8 is 16%. So those numbers are correct, although they're all 16%. You will notice that the 1 year below grade level and 2 or more years below grade level is different for each grade level. As we look at the subgroup population for our American Indian Alaskan Native population, none of those students are on grade level as it relates to math proficiency. For our Asian population, it is 43%. Black and African American, 4%. White, 37%. And Hispanic Latino, 9%. So what are we going to do with this data? So something that we are implementing, and Dr. Thomas and I have talked a lot about, is the idea of strategic support circles. We have given a description in Dr. Thomas's evaluation as it relates to strategic support circles, and actually it starts next Wednesday for our first round of strategic support circles. So to monitor the progress of schools' 90-day plans and the strategic plan, we will implement strategic support circles. So each month, which is 4 times for some schools and 6 times per year for other schools, school leaders will present their most recent student achievement and culture and climate data, which includes student discipline and attendance data, to cabinet and executive staff. So we're having a formal meeting with principals and their teams to review their student achievement data. Principals will also identify any barriers or obstacles that need to be addressed to help increase student achievement. So it's just not a meeting to say, this is where your students are in reading and math. This is to say, this is where your students are in reading and math, and what support do you need from the district to remove those barriers so there are no barriers to student achievement. The purpose of their presentations is to share their progress in 3 main areas. We want to know where they are in student achievement. We want to know how can we support them in planning and assessment, and that relates to supporting their teachers in the classroom. And then we want to know where they are as it relates to climate and culture and community engagement. So the purpose of strategic support circles include creating an ongoing assessment of progress of each individual school. And then the second thing is we want to create an ongoing formal process for schools to solicit additional support from district staff to support these 3 main areas of focus. So for example, a principal called me and said, Mr. Gaskins, I need support. My gym is not as engaging that it should be. It's dark in here. The carpet needs cleaning. Mr. Fisher and I jumped in the car. We went over there, and Mr. Fisher and his team have already rectified those issues. We will paint, I think, over the winter break because we couldn't paint while kids were there. But that's just an example of when a principal says that they need something, then we quickly remove that barrier so that environment, those logistical things that they need are not barriers to engagement for their students. So when we come back, or when I come back, we will have more data that we will share with the board. We will be able to share our initial Georgia kindergarten inventory and developmental skills data, also known as GKIDS. We will have our second round of diagnostic assessment data, which is our iReady data. We will be able to compare our beginning of the year data compared to our mid-year, and our expectation and our hope is that that data will increase. We have interim assessments for grades, it should say 3rd through 12th grade, in ELA, math, science, and social studies. We have developed assessments that mirror the milestones, so students don't see the milestones for the first time in May or in April. They actually get to see what those questions look like 3 times a year and twice a year for our high school students. We will have progress report data as well as course grades for high school. Just reminding you all that we have a goal around 9th and 10th grade students graduating on track. So we will be reviewing the number of course failures as well as students that have passed those courses to make sure that we keep those students on track. And we will be looking at our virtual school enrollment to ensure that that enrollment is going up and that we are putting the appropriate staff as well as the appropriate resources into our virtual school. Dr. Thomas, that concludes my update.
How are we able to have some of the K-5 classes at 22 when the GOD or the Georgia Department of Education max is 21?
So we have invested in lowering class size. So we have kept our teacher population high to keep our student enrollment low. After the 10-day count, we have not collapsed any classes. We have allowed those classes to remain the same size. With our achievement, we want to make sure that teachers have smaller class sizes so they can reach the students that they need to reach.
I think you were asking that we have some over the max.
Yeah, so I think you said that the average was around 17, 18, but some were high as 22, but the max said it was 21. So I just wanted to see how we were.
You may have been talking about one of the other grades.
I was talking about one of the upper grades. So in 5th grade, the max is 28.
Okay.
And those class sizes are sometimes 22.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood that question. We're in compliance because we would lose funding if we were not. Yes.
Ms. Davis and Mr. Davis, and then Ms. Gallagher.
My question, two questions. One question on the class sizes again, I wanted to make sure, is that based on homeroom? Because those kids stay in that, they don't change classes or anything in the first through sixth grade, is that right?
They change classes in middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade,
Seventh.
but those averages are based on homeroom.
Homeroom only. And so,
Yep.
Homeroom first through fifth,
K through 5.
K through 5.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you. And then the second question, given the data that you shared with us, what's the response from teachers? Do we have any input from what teachers say when they see that data? Or what the schools say when they see that data?
So part of what we will discuss with our principals next week is their reactions to the data. A teacher was here tonight that really, and we hear from a lot of teachers through email and when we visit schools about the need of in-person instruction, about the need to not have interruptions in students' instruction. Our teachers are very concerned about the data, and I think they are doing everything to increase the data. I think they are alarmed.
Okay, because I'd love to know what, if you just set them in a room and said fix it, or what are your recommendations? I'd love to hear what they have to say, and I hope you guys are, I'm sure you're collecting that information. My last question was on the strategic support circles. That looks like, again, you're, is it like quarterly or something that you're going to actually go out to the schools and have them report back in on to you on what's going on?
Yes, so we have identified schools that we will meet with 6 times a year, and then we have schools that we will meet with 4 times a year. So 3 per semester for those schools meeting 6 times, and 2 per semester for those students, schools that are meeting 4 times.
Thank you so much. I am absolutely, I've seen this because I went online and I looked at the responses. And so I'm 8 years on the board now, 10, 9, 12, what's 2 from 11? 9 years on the board now. And I'm sorry, it is just not changing. And so I really would love to have some more deeper conversations, Dr. Thomas, about what can we do? What needs to happen, because what we're doing isn't doing it for us. So thank you.
Mr. Gaskins, looking at these numbers kind of remind me of and I don't want to go too far in my own personal history, but I was a school counselor in a school that in Augusta doing the No Child Left Behind. And the 7th year of not making progress, your school was going to be taken over. And we were able to make significant gains to get off that list at year 6. But what got instituted at like year 5 was and I don't necessarily, I don't agree with the terminology, but we were called a failing school, and we had a war room, and we met 3 times a week in the war room. I say we, there were certain lead teachers, there was the administration, there was the counselor, there was a group of about 10 or 12 people that would meet before school at least 3 times a week in this one room. And I know this is COVID and people don't want to be crowded in one room, but we had posters. I mean, we had data all around us, and that became day in and day out, week in and week out. That became kind of the focus that a lot of us faced every morning, well, at least 3 times a week. And I didn't know, I do appreciate the strategic support circles, but I wondered if there's schools that are doing it more on a granular level, and what individual school leaders are doing in terms of creating, because we were in crisis mode. And so, we were in the papers and everything. And so, so the administration of the school, we were forced to the state required us to do what we were doing. And so I'm trying to get a sense that I know the principals are concerned, I know the teachers are concerned, but I'm really concerned about the organization, the change in organization that the schools, particularly who, if the numbers are skewed one school or the other, what what's really being done on that granular level, day in and day out, before school starts every day.
So that's a great question, Mr. Davis. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and the board approved, we have 3 executive directors of leadership development. They are assigned 7 schools each. So we have 2 that focus on our elementary schools, and we have 1 that focuses on middle school, high school, ACCA, and Classic City. They are in schools every week. They visit with the principal and their team, the school, to monitor their 90-day plans and to help thought partner with principals around the challenges they're having in their buildings. Just last week, my team, which includes coordinators, special ed coordinators, curriculum coordinators, the new position, the MTSS specialist that you all approve, they went to every school as a team in person. Sometimes those teams were too large, so we did it virtually, to sit down, and each coordinator who's a specialist in their field had an opportunity to talk to the principal about what they could offer a school to help with student achievement. So the reason that we did it at the beginning of the year is because sometimes schools drown in support, and a principal is overwhelmed and they don't know what lever to pull because there's so many people that are trying to help, and sometimes it doesn't make a difference. So I've charged my team, which are those EDs of leadership development, to coordinate the support for each school. I meet with them every Monday. We talk about things that are working at schools so we can replicate those in every school. And then we talk about things that are not working, and we try to do a root cause analysis about how we can support that principal so we don't spend all year working on something that's not making a difference for kids. I think the other thing, and although those numbers don't look great, here we are in September talking about it, right? So the conversation that we have with our principals now that we're having with our board and our community is focused on achievement. And I can't say that that's always been the case. So I think that having this public conversation and letting our community know this is where we are. And we have debates around a lot of things that are appropriate, but if we're going to move our kids, we have to make this public and continue to have this conversation at the board table, at our schools, in our communities every day. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Gallagher and then Dr. Yeager.
I'm gonna put the rest of my questions in the email. But I do have a few. So you mentioned student growth percentile, but we're still using that. And you don't have to answer this now. I just want to ask it. So what have we been doing with that data to where we couldn't work with that data? Because we've been doing MAP for a while, which still gives that level of data, and we've been doing already. So it's not like we didn't know where students were before this happened. But you don't have to respond to that. And my other question is, why are we saying we're graduating students college and career ready? Because our data doesn't say that we're doing that. And if we're only doing it for a small subgroup of students who would probably be in gifted anyway, we need to say that that's what we're doing, because we aren't with the data. And it's not just this year. This has been ongoing. We got to stop saying that we are doing something and we're not. And I agree with what you just said, like making it more transparent so that the community knows where we are. But I'm not sure that having more meetings on top of meetings that school people already have to have, when they have meetings or academic teams and all kinds of other school level groups that come together to address the same thing, because they see the data, they get together and discuss the data, they get together and discuss it with the LSGTs. But it's not, I don't think it's them, because they're doing the work. And I agree that they need more support, but the district needs to give guidance on what level of support they're willing to give. Because asking for cleaner buildings or clean carpets, like, really? But you don't have to respond. I just wanted to say it out loud.
No problem. I think I can respond to all of those. So the first around our student growth percentiles, you're correct. We've always used student growth percentiles. We have used the state's student growth percentiles for grades 4 through 8, because that is something that they provide us. So we have the state's SGPs as well as our district SGPs. In the absence of the state SGPs, we will continue to use our district SGPs. The only difference is in the past, we have, as we shared the data, we've been sharing the state SGPs. I just wanted to make a note that when we share the data this year, it would be our district SGPs. And I think there were 3 questions. I only remember the first one and the last one like a sandwich. But I think the part that you said around our schools meeting and they have meetings, and you are correct. I think the part that is missing is that we're looking at the data and we are trying a lot of different things. And what our team, under the direction of Dr. Thomas, is trying to make sure that we are doing things that are impactful. And so sometimes, even when I was a principal myself and Dr. Thomas, you're so deep in the work, because they work hard, they're probably still at work, right? You need someone to say, okay, let's assess how this data is moving based on these actions. And so, and then just the last part, and maybe it wasn't a great example, our principals spent a lot of time focused on things that sometimes are not focused on achievement, right? So a dirty building means you have parents that are emailing you about a dirty building, right? And if we can remove that barrier and say, the principal said the building is dirty, let's just go clean it, that's 10 less emails that principal has to respond to, so they can spend more time reviewing lesson plans, talking to teachers about what their innovative ideas are to support student achievement. I look forward to your email.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this short. So what I see here in this presentation, and thank you, Ms. Palmer, I just got the PowerPoint. I see 2 things. One is that we have a waiting list and a critical need for early learning. And you can see where I'm going. I'm just explaining my vote later. The other thing I see is that these kids are behind before they start. The K, grade K, we've got 80% yellow for reading. We desperately need early learning. Would you agree with that statement? Do you think that that will help fix this problem? Ms. Linda pointed out this is been going on for decades. Maybe not quite that long. Sorry. But so that early learning is one of the really critical ways to fix this.
The earlier we get students in school and consistently in school, the better their achievement will be.
And we have a waiting list for those positions currently.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I do have
Ms.
a
Hall
clarifying.
and then Dr. Dykeman.
So I know that pre-K is state funded and Head Start is federal funded. But is there a difference in the application process for the enrollment criteria? Because we do have vacant seats for Head Start. And so I'm wondering if those seats could be filled for that family.
That's a Ms. Higginbotham expert question. Can you answer that?
Ms. Higginbotham, could you come to the microphone for us?
Yes, there is a difference in the application process. Our pre-K is for all 4-year-olds who were 4 as of September 1 of the current school year, and any child is eligible that lives in Georgia. And it's funded through the Department of Early Care and Learning. Head Start, Early Head Start are grant funded, they're federally funded, and they're targeting students at high risk. And so there is a selection criteria actually that y'all vote on for our community that is reflective of our community assessment. And so it serves children from lower income homes, but it also serves children that have higher needs or higher risk associated with our community needs, such as, young or teenage parents, maybe families that have some kind of a historical drug addiction or mental health or homelessness, foster. So there are a lot of components, but there is, whereas pre-K, that wait list is a first come, first served basis. In Head Start and Early Head Start, it's really a risk point.
So I guess, and I promise.
No, you're fine.
But just, I guess what I'm getting at is if we have vacant seats in pre-K
Mhm.
and we have children who are 4 and in Georgia, even though they may be eligible for Head Start, is there a way for them to get into pre-K?
Oh,
for
I'm sorry.
early learning?
Yes, we have Head Start pre-Ks as well as Head Start children who've turned 4, actually are in all 102 of our 3-year-olds have that desire to have a spot in our 4-year-old pre-K. The Head Start is actually for 3-year-olds, school age
That's
3-year-olds.
the missing part.
My
Okay.
apologies. There is a Head Start pre-K, which is why it gets confusing. Is 2 of our pre-Ks are dual served Head Start and pre-K, and that so they have the wraparound services from Head Start in addition to the state funded grant.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions, but I won't ask them all now. And I know that you said that you want to meet with the accountability committee. So I look forward to having those discussions as well and talking about more of the data. But my question, 2 questions. One is I just want to clarify that these iReady assessments were taken like the first and second week of school, correct? So these, while the data are not good, they're not assessing really what's happening so far this year. They were taken prior to really anything happening this year, right?
Right. So the way that the assessment is set up is it's a diagnostic assessment. So it gives students questions that are harder than they would normally get. And if you've ever taken like the GRE, it adjusts when you miss a question. And so the reason that we give it 3 times a year is for that reason, is that at the beginning of the year, students come with their funds of knowledge from a previous grade. And then we should see increases over the year once they've been given more instruction. The other thing that iReady does in the background is based on their beginning of the year data, it predicts where they should be throughout the year, which is the most important data, meaning that we want to have students have a year of growth. And the iReady assessment, like other diagnostic assessments, helps us determine if students are on track for that year worth of growth.
Okay. And then my other question was, I guess it's not really a question, but in terms of the iReady data, it's just one piece of information. So I guess it is a question like, what other measures are we using? And if you sat a teacher down and said, like, this student here is showing on iReady that they are not on level, would you agree with that? Are we doing anything like that and sort of corroborating with teachers to determine whether or not these scores that they're getting on iReady are reflective of the student's performance?
So that is a great point. So we also use, and I think I may have had this question before, we use a reading inventory called BASS that we also give. So we like to triangulate the data to make sure that we have 3 data points. So we do that. Some teachers say, absolutely not. This is not the performance that I would expect from this student. And there's also a report in iReady that's called a rush report. So we know if students have rushed through the assessment. So it's not, this kid is 2 years behind, now they have to be in the Blackbird group forever in eternity.
What?
You never heard of that? Okay, maybe that's just me from the 80s. But bluebirds, yeah. But it is just a starting point for the teacher. It's just one piece of data for the teacher. But the most important thing is the ability for the SGP. So I would really be excited when I come in January to be able to show you, based on this beginning of the year data, the number of where we are as it relates to proficiency, but also where we are as it relates to progress.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Anderson, and then Ms. Davis.
Just a couple of questions. The first one, so with the, correct me if I'm wrong, with this plan, there's going to be the iReady and additional assessments and also interim assessments with iReady as well. If that's taking away from instructional time, how is that supporting the educators in trying to get the students where they need to be. Because I have heard repeatedly from teachers that iReady takes away from their instructional time and is not supportive of what they're trying to do, but rather a barrier to what they're trying to do. And then my second question, from the district level, has there been any conversations about a blanket-wide approach to support services throughout all of the schools, like tutoring in every single school, and after-school services that include instructional plans in every single school that is supported at the district level, rather than every principal having, and I don't want to take the autonomy, I'm not saying take the autonomy away. I'm saying perhaps take that load of having to make the decision and find the financial support and resources and put that in the district's hands so that the principals can go about the business of principaling. So I wonder if those two conversations have been had. After school programs throughout the district that have instructional support, rather than just recreation.
So I met with Hope, your second question first, because that's the one that I remember, but I think I remember the first one as well. So we just met today with Hope McGuire, who is our Director of Federal Programs, about tutoring programs. And so our plan is to provide all schools with funding for tutoring for the next 3 years. We're going to present that to Cabinet, not on Monday, but the following Monday, around what that per pupil allocation is. That's just something that we talked about today. We do think that academic tutoring, and just not academic tutoring, but SEL coaching as well for students. So that is on the docket to be able to provide that to schools, because we don't want them to have to look for funding for tutoring. We have that money in our ARPA funds. So we're working on that part. I will say, and we had this conversation as a team, is that we had summer school and we have provided funds for tutoring. And it is not as popular now in the current state that we're in because of COVID. So we don't have as many teachers and students that are, or families that are taking advantage of some of the tutoring ideas that we have because of the uncertainty of COVID. But we have ARPA funds for 3 years, and we're still gonna allot that money. So when our conditions get better, they have the money for tutoring. The part about assessment is a part of instruction that we think is important. So the thing about our interim assessments and our ready assessments is that, number one, they're low stakes assessments, and we want teachers to use it as a starting point for how we instruct students. So students don't come in as blank slates. They come in already knowing things. And our interim assessments and our diagnostic assessments gives that information to the teacher to say, this is where the gap is. So when it says that the student is a year behind, it also says this is what the student knows. The student knows these letters. The student has a strong phonemic awareness. The student can count to 10. The student can count on by 20. So it gives this information so the teacher can start where the student is instead of starting at page 1 in a textbook. Because we have added our diagnostic assessments, which we've always given, we've in the past given, Dr. Thomas, help me, MAP instead of iReady, and interims. We have removed other assessments. We're not requiring schools to give unit assessments. Schools were giving a unit assessment every time they finished a unit. We are not requiring schools to do that. So we were trying to balance the need to give a diagnostic assessment, which is required by the state, and our interim assessments with removing some of the other assessments that are not required.
I'll be brief. Again, the question, not necessarily, well, it is a question. When I got the presentation on iReady, I was very excited about iReady because it actually gave us individual performance of individual students. And so we know at a person level exactly where that student is based on this criteria. I don't want us to get to a place that we can never have that information. So it took a long time to get here. I don't want us to see us eliminate that. Now, in terms of validating that, in terms of does the teacher agree with the assessment, help me on that. That's a whole nother conversation. And so I'll need to understand why we would buy something that wouldn't be valuable to us in making that assessment, because that's what I heard in the other comments. The question that I had is, based on the results that we're seeing here, and I did look across the state at a couple of other school systems that I think are kind of similar to us. These aren't bad. I mean, they're bad. They're horrible results, but we're not different, are we? And that's the question. Are we really different in terms of our assessments on the where we are below grade level or 1 or 2 grades behind? Are we unique in this, or are we like everybody else?
I don't know if I can answer that fairly, Ms. Davis.
And
That
don't
may be,
answer it then I'm good. But
I'm gonna
I
have to
just want
follow
to
up
know.
on that. I will say that our achievement gap is sometimes wider than some of the other districts that I study to see how they're doing things to support our kids. But I would
Okay.
need to do some research around that.
And it doesn't excuse where we are. Let me be really clear. I'm not trying to look for that, but I want to know, how alarmed should I be? Because I'm very alarmed, quite frankly. But again, I recognize that these are COVID results, and so we're in a whole different environment, and so they get a little bit of weight there in terms of it's serious, and yet they're conditions that we need to pay attention to. I really want to make sure that as a board, and as a community, we absolutely know where we have deficits, so that as a community we can respond to see it, where we can fit in and fill those gaps. So we can't do that on our own. We'll need the district to tell us what supports are needed from the community.
Yes, ma'am. And then I'm sorry, Ms. Gallagher, I know you said you were going to put your emails and your questions in an email, but I think the other part that I just want to highlight is that this is the reason that we've made this a part of our strategic plan. If these things with high school students being career and college ready, or students making adequate growth, this would not be something that I would be presenting. This would not be something that we are putting our energy, our resources, our time into. This is what we need to focus on. And so I think that was the other part of your question that I just wanted to respond to. We don't think that every student that crosses our stage is going to be able to go straight to college or straight into a job with industry certification. So that's why we've identified it in our strategic plan.
Mr. Gaskins, I have 2 questions. One, with the iReady data and then the other assessments, are these administered to all students? So I'm thinking about like students that may have like special needs or be differently able. How are we assessing their progress with their individualized, plans?
Great question. We do not give it to all students depending on their exceptionality. So some of our students, based on their IEP, they may take iReady or other assessments that we give because they're in a collab setting. But based on their disability, we may be tracking their progress through their IEP goals versus their academic goals solely. Some of our students have goals like toilet training or being able to respond with blinking. So our teachers are very versed in how to keep track of those goals that we keep through their IEP.
Okay. And is that something like with you that within the special education department that they are looking at and, figuring out ways to be able to either improve or change or continue doing, what they're doing? I'm just wondering, how do we
So we give an assessment,
measure
and I am not the expert on this, so I do my best. We give an assessment called GAA 2.0, which is an alternative assessment for those students that have exceptionalities where taking the Georgia milestones would not be appropriate for them. So we have data. It's more of a portfolio assessment. Our teachers are trained in GAA, and actually our GAA scores are quite good. Where they're actually assessing the student through their IEP goals.
Okay.
It's a portfolio that we actually send in. The teacher completes the portfolio. It takes a while to do. It's almost the majority of the year as they collect data. They send it off to an independent scorer that scores that student's ability against their IEP goals.
Okay, and then my last question for right now is, you mentioned I think it was instructional executive directors, um, and I think 2 were for elementary. Is that what you mentioned? And
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was curious when you mentioned that they're supporting the principals and helping facilitate conversations. What have you all assessed as it relates to their comfort in being able to facilitate tough conversations? Like the degree, I know students come in and they're shaped outside of school, but then also some of those classroom conditions, from classroom management to cultural competency, those things. How are we having those conversations, or are we, or do you feel like we're building capacity?
I definitely feel like we are building capacity. We have been afforded, I think, 3 of the very, very high functioning previous principals, 2 from within our district, Dr. Jennifer Scott, who had great success at Barnett Shoals, and Dr. Worthy, who had great success at Timothy. So the first is we have great individuals in those roles, and they are also receiving coaching. So they're receiving coaching to have tough conversations with principals around those things that are not comfortable to talk about. We, Dr. Worthy visited a school today that was having some issues, and I won't, reveal the issue because it was between her and the principal about a grade level of kids and their behavior. And she had a tough conversation with the principal around the things that needed to happen so we could support those kids. And she's going to follow up next week around their growth. So I think that they are, number one, the right people because they were successful principals, and the coaching that they're receiving is around having those tough conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable to have, because at the end of the day, we all want our kids to be successful. And if we are not honest with adults, we're kind of lying to kids.
Who's the third person? You said the first 2 because they were Clark County, but we gotta be equitable.
Yes, and he's probably gonna be like, "Why you didn't say my name during your presentation?" His name is Dr. Neil Crossland, and he supports our middle schools and our high schools. And he spent all day at 3 middle schools today. I have not seen my team in a whole week because they are living in schools trying to make sure that our principals and students have what they need. I look forward to your emails. Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins. And now Dr. Watley. All right.
So this evening, I'm not going to give an update as it relates to strategic priority number 3. I was asked to give an update as it relates to discipline. And so if you would please bear with me, we're going to take a walk where we were, where we are, and where we're going. I will be presenting on the strategic priority number 3 in another 2 or 3 months, the entire, piece of that. So today is just discipline. All right. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide district leaders, the board, with an update as it relates to discipline, protocols, and procedures related to the discipline in CCSD. This is our previous data. Ooh, this thing moves fast. From the report that was done by Dr. Welsh. This is where it, started, and many of you have asked questions as it relates to that. So as we can see, our Black students, our African American students are, at this time, were disproportionately receiving office discipline referrals. So we have, for example, look, Black times male. If you're a male and you're Black, you're twice more likely to receive a office discipline referral. And so you can see that that was in elementary school. As it relates to middle school, same reflection in the data. We see that females was increasing during that time. Black and male is 52% compared to 25% other. And so going to high school, it's reflecting the same at that time. And again, this is time stamped during that time that our African American students were being disproportionately receiving office discipline referrals. So what do we do? Oh. If you're Black times male, Welch report. This is all the data from the Welch report. That's straight from that report. That's it. Yeah. So the recommendations from that report, elementary schools, the goal is to reduce the use of OSS for students in K-2, except in situations of serious physical injury. We do know that sometimes students exhibit behaviors that go beyond, and so they require a different level of support. What that support looks like, we have to sit with that team and discuss that. Middle schools, reduce the use of OSS for subjective offenses like disrespect. What does that mean? What may be disrespectful to one person is not disrespectful to another person. Then as it relates to high schools, reduce the use of OSS for attendance-related infractions, such as tardiness, unexcused absences, leaving school without permission, and also dress code violations, which we've updated the dress code in school code of conduct. And reduce the use of OSS for subjective offenses again. Okay, so the route, walk with me here. You can't attack discipline on one level. You have to attack it with policies, you have to attack it with programs, and with personnel. And so that's the 3 Ps approach to this process. So as it relates to, Jesus, this thing is just moving. As it relates to policy, we didn't do that for Ms. Baskins. As it relates to policy, so we are still reviewing the student code of conduct. This year, we revised it. We lifted the supports that students have. This year, we're going to take another deeper dive into reviewing the discipline matrix. And one piece that we want to add in there is how are our administrators using restorative practices, and really embed that into how we document that, because we've got to start capturing the great work that they're doing in schools, okay? Then we're reviewing our attendance policy and also a review of schools' overall approach to subjective offenses. Yeah. Then we have programs. Professional development for school leaders, professional development for teachers. We want to bolster SEL for students as well as PBIS. What does PBIS look like in the school, and how can we create space for our leaders to look at that data and drill down on incidences and students? Who are your high-flying students? Where are these incidents occurring? And really use that data to be more preventative. Also support and expand restorative discipline initiatives. So our goal was to create a space in our district where we have rolled out restorative practices across the district, not just in certain schools, to make it a system-wide approach in terms of how we see discipline in our discipline framework. Thank you. The third P is personnel. The hiring of our Director of Restorative Discipline, and thank you, board, for approving that. We have Utavia Tolber, who is our Director of Restorative Discipline. She is here tonight. So here are a few things that we're working and doing right now in schools. Facilitate the implementation of restorative discipline district-wide. That's a huge goal for us. With the board's permission, we would like to get IRP as well as the other company, GCC, hopefully off the ground so that we can go full throttle and implement it in our schools. Facilitate restorative circles. We've already been doing that in schools. Listening tours. That means that we go into schools and actually talk to principals, talk to administrators to see take a deeper dive into their data and understand the school culture and climate and thought partner with them. We also are going to look to this year piloting discipline intervention teams in schools. And hopefully the goal is for who is going to sit on that team: school counselors, administrators, school psychologists, school social workers. Then a heavy focus on increasing community involvement. To your point earlier, after school tutoring or tutoring, but also SEL. Like, how can we incorporate and get the community to help with those initiatives? Review the school and district data to identify trends and practices to reduce exclusionary practice. It is in the research. A lot of these things that are happening, CCSD, happen in a lot of schools. As students go up the developmental sequence, discipline becomes challenging, okay? Because they're growing. Their emotions all over the place. Where do you think it's gonna land first? Middle school. That is no different than any other school district. And so we've got to look at what can we provide supports in middle school to help them with that issue. Then collaborate with school leaders to implement interventions to support the culture and climate of the school. Slide. So our restorative practice strategy is the train the trainer model. The goal here is for us to be able to sustain the work without relying on external company. That's just as plain as clear as I can say that. Will be led by 15 internal trainers after they are trained and 3 primary leaders. The director of restorative discipline is going to lead this work in collaboration with myself, executive director of student support services, with cross-collaborative leads, including director of school counseling, social work, as well as behavior specialists. And there is a targeted focus on rigorous training and coaching support for district leaders, for our school administrators, and school-based support teams. In order to sustain the work, that is important. Each school will designate a restorative leadership team throughout the implementation process who will oversee and support the implementation on the grounds in the schools. Each RLT member will participate in, and hopefully, if we can, get this approved, IRP's training, whether it's by online because of COVID or in face-to-face. The goal is to create an internal function to continue to train and educate all staff ongoing for years and years to come. Hearing updates and procedures, Mr. Sam Preston and Ms. Utivia Tolber are serving as the district hearing officers. A request for a date to provide initial and refresher training for administrators on hearing procedures will be shared soon. And also two things that we are working on right now. One, if you guys go back last year, I spoke to you about the case consultation process, where we receive students. We have a formal process on how we receive students from DJJ, as well as receiving students from psychological facilities. So now that we have the spine of that process, now we have to layer on the meat. That's how my brain works. So with the DJJ, we have to cross-collaborate with chief, with the police officers, so that once a student, for example, is arrested over the weekend or anything occurs over the weekend, they contact CCSD to let us know, and then we enlist our process. Does that make sense? As well as from psychological facilities. Sometimes that communication gap happens where students are released and we don't have that information so that we can have a good transition for that student to come back into the school. So we're working closely with our partners, making them aware of our processes, but not only making them aware of our process, but putting them in contact with key personnel to make sure that that process is followed through when they hit the grounds in CCSD. So, slide. I think this is it for me today. Any questions?
Okay, Ms. Gallagher and then Ms. Hull.
Okay, so these are less questions. I'm excited about this. Okay, so a couple of things. And you mentioned partnerships, and when you said that, it made me think of the Boys and Girls Club and how they respond to discipline problems. So say a student gets in trouble on the bus and they get kicked off the bus. The rule is no bus, no club. So if we could strengthen those kinds of relationships with organizations that do have extended support, I think that would be good for students. That way there's a real community school kind of collaboration around the expectations of students in regards to discipline and behavior. The other thing I have is you mentioned a listening tour.
Mm-hmm.
If we could incorporate somehow a student listening tour. I've listened to a lot of students. They have some really great ideas around discipline and addressing it, especially because it's their peers and they can see it a lot differently than adults see issues. which is something I'll continue to say. Sometimes we're gonna have to get out the way because these children can come up with very good solutions. And if anyone who has kids have ever asked their kids what they think the consequences should be for something that they did, at least in my experience, it's always like 3 times more harsh than something I would have come up with. So I think kids are really good with coming up with solutions because they can see it from that vantage point. And if there isn't a model, this is my last thing. If there isn't a model for what, and don't nobody have to take it, I just want to say it out loud. Now we used to have peer mediation a long time ago, but the problem was there wasn't a person who could consistently put in time to make sure that it worked in our schools. And the only way I know about it and remember is because I was in it at COIL when I went there. But you said train the trainer. So if there were a piece of all of the other trainings that we could provide to students who are going to be in the system for a long time, so maybe 5th grade, they're going to matriculate through the system, they would naturally share that training with their peers. So it's not just adults who are getting the training, but students. And then if one day we're going to recruit students to be teachers, they might as well have gotten this early. That's all I got.
I can let me speak to 2 or 3 things. You had some good points. So one, I met with my team the other day, and when I say my team, director of social work, director of restorative discipline, as well as our trauma-informed specialists around providing comprehensive training to our bus drivers, 1, but also 2, providing them a safe space for wellness. So the trauma-informed specialist that you all approved is willing and able and very competent in providing training, but also helping people get through this challenging time. And so we're about to roll out a training for them, cross-collaborating with the Office of the Transportation Office. The second piece is the student voice. It's super important as a part of the restorative practice strategy that we lift their voices. So Lawrence Harris has been doing excellent work in reviewing those applications for students. And he and I have been thought partnering. I think I have 2 things I want to bring before those students. One is, and I'm going to lift this to cabinet next Monday, because I'm glad you brought that up. I get emails from students just about various things. They'll just email me about how they feel, and I save them. And sometimes some kids may feel unsafe in certain situations. So we were talking about it as a team. Wow, what if there was an anonymous thing for students to have where they can report things that they feel unsafe? So we're talking about it in my team today, and we want the trauma-informed specialist said there's a program for that. So my goal next Monday is to present that to cabinet to talk about it, where we can have a space where you don't have to put your name or anything. You can just report if you feel unsafe, or you can report if you see something that may potentially be unsafe in a school. I think that not only helps with a child's ability to trust the system, but it also helps with building their self-confidence and their self-advocacy. And we also have to be really real that sometimes kids see things, sometimes adults see things, and they're scared to tell. And that's just real. And so if we can have a system, a mechanism for reporting for students, that would be great. And that's something I want to lift to cabinet as well as to this committee of students. So thirdly, student listening tours are super, super important in this work. We talked about it, Ms. Tolbert, I'm always calling you Dr. Tolbert because you're going to be one. Taking some of these pieces with this student code of conduct before them as it relates to the discipline matrix this year. That's why I intentionally held off on touching the discipline matrix last year, because their voices need to be heard. Not to say we're going to all agree, but I need to see, my team needs to see, we need to see things through their eyes. And that's value. And I hope I answered your questions.
So I could not have set that up better. So if it is helpful, I would volunteer to train every middle school to have a peer mediation team. It's what I do. I charge, I will volunteer to make sure if you can get me the students together and I can help with that process,
Mhm.
I will train so that every middle school team or every middle school could have a peer mediation team, and I will front the cost out of my own pocket because that is valuable. And research
Mhm.
shows us that students don't always have conflict resolution skills.
Mhm.
And so being able to teach them and develop a culture where they can learn to self-regulate and help each other, I'm for it. I will do it. So that's the
Absolutely.
offer. Let me know. There's no
Absolutely.
pressure, but let me know if it's something that can be helpful when you discuss it with your colleagues. And then as far as disciplinary data, I hear a lot of concerns about waivers being presented to parents before they're truly explained in terms of tribunals and them having those waived. I would suggest maybe tracking the recommendations from the family for discipline, the district from discipline, so that can be compared to what results are at or what punishments are being administered,
Mhm.
because the buck does stop with the hearing officer. And if a school is disproportionately imposing harsher consequences, I want to make sure that it's not just being rubber stamped. I want to be able to see some of those things. So if we could just keep in mind the waiver and how that's presented to parents, and then being able to track some of that data so we can come back and evaluate, I think that will help us really capture whether or not this restorative, the restorative practices are working.
Thank you. And I'll allow Director of Restorative Discipline to speak to that a little bit.
Good evening. To speak to your question or statement, I have been taking a closer look at the waivers. Most times when the waivers are presented, the principals are basically saying, hey, you are already guilty of this. In lieu of the hearing, let's take a look at it. I contact the parent and say, hey, I want to make sure you understand your rights because they're in the code of conduct. Want to make sure you understand that when you give up these rights, when you sign this waiver, this is what you are forgoing, right? Most of the waivers that I have been a part of the last month, which has been 4, have been for drugs, right? And so part of that is to offer the rap class. I have made a suggestion that the rap class is not just one session. It needs to be several sessions, because if I was going to suspend you or place you into alternative school for 90 days, one session is not enough for me to make sure that you have been restored. And again, restoration does not eliminate consequences. So we want to make sure that we are addressing those things. However, I want to also make sure that when I send a student back, they know what was happening in the building. They are restored. They hopefully won't have that happen again. And we're looking at that too, to address some of the gang violence that's happening. So we are taking a look at that. And again, as of right now, we've only had 4 waivers. That's a lot, but hopefully it will decrease when we implement restorative practices.
I love that. The only piece I will add is to make sure that families know that they're twofold. The waiver doesn't just get rid of their rights in terms of having a hearing, but I want them to also know that they can still say, "Hey, I did this conduct. I'm guilty of that, but I still have the ability to give my recommendation or to give a recommendation in terms of my punishment." It doesn't have to be I'm waiving and I have to agree to the district's recommendation for punishment. And I think that's missing. And I think when we talk about getting communities involved, families know about different programs in the community. So instead of expelling this child, if this child can get into a mentoring program or something in conjunction and have really a holistic approach to really restore them, I think that's beneficial. And I think that piece of advice has been missing when parents are presented with a waiver and they think that my child did it, my child agrees to it, so I just have to do what the district recommends, and that is not right. Yeah.
I can assure you that that is no longer happening. It will not happen. And so with us presenting those waivers, they are made aware of their rights. And I do offer any organization that I feel like will be beneficial for the student. And if not, I call around and I ask. So we are trying. We're happy.
And we had our first rap class this week. We had 4 students participate.
Can I ask a couple of questions? I wanted to echo what Ms. Hull said about and about the resources in the community. And so I am very happy to hear, that we have someone in that position, Dr. Tolbert, who is going and, exploring other options for children who are really almost at the end of their rope as it relates to being able to be in schools. I do have one recommendation or maybe thing to think through as it relates to the listening tour. I know that Ms. Gallagher mentioned students. Also know when it comes to like drastic changes with discipline, particularly when we're talking about policy changes and things like that, that it's also important to be able to hear and have those conversations in the community, because everybody has an opinion about. I mean, this is something that people get really passionate about, from like principals to it sort of cuts across all sections of our community. So if I may just toss that out there, the importance of having this, also having information from the community, because our schools really are a microcosm of what's going on.
Absolutely.
But in our community. And so, and then lastly is more of a question. And with the team of trauma specialists and director of restorative practices, and you, Dr. Watley, and social work and counselors, I'm just thinking of all of the support professionals. Where do our behavior specialists fit in? Because when I think about that team and how ideally that I would think it would function, we've talked about two strategic areas that really are intertwined, achievement and then discipline and climate and culture. And like in a ideal world, that team would be able to float and be able to help support instructional practices, but then also as they're needed for clinical and any other support services as it relates to discipline or counseling. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out where might they fit in this.
They're going to be working cross-functionally with this team. So a lot of the behavior specialists, behavior coordinators sit on our SEL district team. They also will be sitting on our district-wide discipline task force that will be led by Ms. Tolbert. And so we're going to be working cross-functionally. While on the organizational chart, they don't sit under me, we still have a lot of work that we cross-collaborate on daily.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
I got one more, but it's probably less for you than it is for somebody else because I don't know where it goes. So I remember there being something said about CARES funding to support community-based organizations. And I'm going to tell you where my brain is going. So in regards to discipline, this is how it lines up.
Okay.
And I know it's COVID, so but there have been organizations who have been in the past able to work with students who were recommended by teachers or counselors or social workers to participate in a program that was offered in the school. And sometimes, and the one I'm thinking of is like Uncrowned Kings. And so Mr. Rice came into COIL, and students, and it was mostly Black males. COIL's all Black anyway. But the students who were identified were sent to do like enrichment, almost like mentoring, and for those students, and I can't speak directly to the data, but I felt like just based on conversations, for the students who are identified to participate in that program, because it wasn't someone in the school who was required or trained to address behavior issues, because sometimes training gets in the way. And the approach was different than something that a social worker would do. The behaviors actually improved over time. Is that something that we are looking into so that it's not all the people Lakeisha listed or you listed up there? Because sometimes that don't work. It's more scary.
Sometimes, and I say this all the time, relationships matter. Even when I functioned as a psychologist, it didn't mean that I was going to be able to help every kid. And I'm okay with that because it could be my gender, my race, maybe the way I talk, whatever. And so, when we go on these listening tours, that's critical information that a principal should share with us, because what Ms. Talbot and I want to do is to be able to document those types of programs that are happening in schools. We know there's a lot of great stuff happening, but sometimes our matrix just only allows you to capture certain things, which tends to not be so good, right? So we want to be able to lift those types of things you're talking about. If there's a program in their school that's working, how can we create a system where we're tracking data for those students who are involved in that program? Because then that's value add. And that program may work at that school, but it may not work in another school. And so we've got to be researching in a way in terms of how we're selecting and holding people accountable, but also tracking the performance and what they're doing for our kids. So yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. All right, thank you all.
Thank you for those updates.
Thank
All right.
you.
Okay. We will move forward to items 8. Well, we'll start with item 8. And as we go into these particular areas, all of these are areas that were on our agenda last week that we have discussed. And so as we move forward with the items 8 and beyond, I am going to ask us to or recommend that we use our Robert's Rules of Order and speak twice on these things if there's anything that needs to be said or discussed further. And, if not, that's fine. And then also, Dr. Maddox, if you can help me just being sure that everyone has had a chance to speak, at least that first round, and then we'll go to a second round. All right, so we'll move forward to number 8, and these are our policy regulations exhibits that will be posted for 4 weeks for public comment.
So I haven't received any questions or concerns since last week, so I would just propose that we move these 4 policies up for public comment.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Yeager, a second by Dr. Maddox. Any additional questions or discussion?
And just a reminder, these are the 4E policies: the insurance management, leasing and renting, risk management, and security. Sorry.
Mr. Davis?
Okay. Last week, I raised the question with EBH, and the understanding I had is that we were going to revisit with Mr. Pruitt, our attorney, but I'm fine with moving it forward if we can discuss it at the next policy meeting. And also, you had mentioned, Dr. Yeager, the connection between EBH and KG. And that came up tonight with one of our speakers in terms of the use of school facilities. So, I'm fine with going ahead and putting it out for public comment, but I do want to revisit those 2 policies and with the permission of the policy committee.
So we set the agenda for next week this morning.
Excuse me.
Well, check with Mr. Harris and see if we want to add this to next week's policy meeting. KG was solved. We solved KG already with regards to the gentleman's comment earlier today. That was fixed. So we don't need to revisit it in terms of his comment. I just need to call him and let him know we fixed it. In terms of EBH, I think we do need to kind of think about this leasing of property. Yeah, we can come back and fix it if you want to talk some more, but I don't think we should delay this one getting moved up right now, if that's
okay. I'm saying go ahead and put it out for public comment. I just want an opportunity before we vote to have the policy committee look at it.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Mr. Harris, can we add that to the agenda? Thank you.
And I do think that with that KG came up last week in our discussion, because it was alluded to that my concerns were being addressed in KG. And so that policy was also discussed. And so that's why I think it's appropriate for us to see the connections between those two. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to move these up for public comments and a second. All in favor, if you would say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. We'll move forward to number 9. These are our policy, regulations, and exhibits to be adopted, rescinded, revised, and reviewed.
So I'm delighted that these particular policies are coming up tonight in response to some of Dr. Watley's very, very amazing changes that she's making. So these ones have been out for public comment. As far as I know, there has been no public comment. Mr. Harris, correct? Yeah. These 4 of these out of 5, one is the dress code, one is student suspensions. Actually, one's the reg and the policy for student suspensions that really puts in place some of the work that Dr. Watley has been doing this year. So I'm very delighted that to move that these be adopted. These will be adopted tonight if we vote yes. Yes.
Only the policies, though.
Correct. The regulation is just for our information.
Thank you.
Okay, is that a motion from you, Dr. Yeager?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a second by Mr. Davis. Any additional questions or discussion? All right, all in favor of these policies, regulations, and exhibits being adopted, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have one opposed.
My opposition is that we don't adopt regs, we only do policies. And so if we could change that motion to only adopt the regs, then it would be correct. Is that correct?
My motion was to adopt the 4 policies. I'm sorry, I didn't use the number.
You stated the policies. I think Dr. Gant stated the policies and regs. And so we just need to be very clear that we are only adopting policy.
Okay, I don't know that takes a vote over, Mr. Pruitt. We just need to make a note that it was policies, because I think we said this last week, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, all right, so the motion and the vote that took place was for the policies. And we've taken the vote for those in favor. Ms. Davis, is your vote still no?
I can vote in favor of adopting the policies.
Okay. And are there any abstaining? Okay. All right, we'll move forward to our personnel recommendations. 10-1, which is the board report, and then the addendum that's been added. Dr. Thomas, is there any additional information here?
No, ma'am. It's my recommendation that the board report and addendum related to personnel be approved.
All right. The floor is open for a motion.
I see, are you going to? I so move.
Okay, Ms. Davis made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Hall made a second. Any follow-up questions? Dr. Anderson, did you have a question? Okay. Any additional questions or conversation? All right. All in favor? Dr. Thomas, and I can't remember who made the motion. It was for 10-1 and 10-2, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So all in favor of approving 10-1, the board report, and 10-2, the addendum, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And any abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. We'll move to our consent agenda. These were the items that were left on the consent agenda. The floor is open.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Davis. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a second by Ms. Hall. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will move forward to so that motion carries. We are at number 12, and these are all of our other action items. We will start with the action to approve the August 5th call meeting minutes.
Dr. Gant, minutes were added because Ms. Palmer was ill last week, excuse me, and they just were not available to get on the consent agenda. That's the only reason they're in a different spot this month.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Davis?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve items 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3 with any necessary corrections.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion by Ms. Davis to approve items 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3. We have a second by Ms. Hull. Any follow-up questions, concerns, or discussion? All in favor, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And any abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. So we are at item 12.4. And this is the action to approve moving forward with the disparity study. This was the study, and the information was shared with us in finance. And we did have this on our agenda last week, but I'm going to open the floor for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Maddox, a second by Dr. Yeager. Open the floor for any follow-up questions. Let me say this. I do think it's important for us to, we'll go around to be sure if there are additional questions that everyone has a chance to speak. And from my understanding, I don't think there have been any follow-up questions to the district staff on any, well, not any, but some of these remaining action items. And so I say that to say we need to be efficient with our time. And if this is something that needs to be moved or pulled or something like that, I would encourage us to use the processes we have in place versus having too much discussion and questions that we could have had last week or we could have asked over the week. Mr. Davis and then Ms. Davis.
Yeah, mine's very simple. Last week we were given a sheet of paper that had, if I remember correctly, there were 3 proposals that, I mean, we had put out an RFP and we had gotten 3 responses, and 4. Okay, and a couple of them were state, in the state, and the others were, I think, out of state, if I remember right. But have we selected one, or are we just? I'm confused.
No, we're waiting for the board to say that they want us to move forward so that we can do those next steps. It's been put out for RFP, and they have read through those responses, but the board is waiting. I'm sorry, that selection team is waiting to make a recommendation, and they will bring that recommendation forward, but we wanted to ensure before they went to the next step that it was the will of the board that we move forward.
Ms. Davis.
And so, again, since we only saw that one sheet that says this is the RFP that we got back, could someone please just refresh our memory on the steps that we're going to take to go through this? Because the question I thought was, do we need to do this disparity study? Is this the way we want to spend funds to get some results? And so if somebody can just enlighten us on those steps that happen as a result of this, and then what happens as a result of getting once we get the study, what do we do? Can somebody just give us an overview of that so that we'll know exactly what we're voting for?
And you are right, that is the purpose of this vote.
Do we want to go forward? Exactly. Mhm.
Sorry. One of the things we shared, I think it was last week, was that we would probably have to hire some temporary assistants just to help with pulling, because if you recall, we could not just look at construction level contracts. We have to look at all contracts that go out from us as a board. So it will just require a lift in terms of pulling those contracts, making those copies, compiling that information. The company, whomever is chosen, will then go through that information and assess the equity or determine if there is a reason to move to the next step. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So I didn't understand what your last comment, Mr. Schuleman.
He said, well said.
Oh, excellent.
He said I
Thank
was
you.
accurate in
And,
how
and so the results of the disparity study, if we go forward with this, we will expect to get what, and maybe this is a question for our attorney, in terms of what does the disparity study give us as a district?
because then you're able to do preference in terms of selection. Is that correct?
Mr. Pruitt, can you come to the mic, please?
The disparity study is to determine if Clark County School District has been an active participant in discrimination in contracting and purchasing. If so, that justifies implementation of a preference program to remedy that past discrimination.
That was so well said.
Thank you.
Okay.
Additional questions? Okay, Ms. Davis, did you have another question?
I can't think of another question. Again, I would ask this question. Again, given that Clark County follows pretty much what Athens Clark County Unified Government does and what the University of Georgia does, should we be the ones to bear the cost of this study, or should we be looking to try and partner with one of our other state agencies in this county to help bear this cost? And the real question is, do we really, I don't know if we have a sense of where this leads us. And I'm fine going down the road with that, but that's a pretty good high amount of money to pay if we still can't get the results that the remedy that we're looking for.
All right. I think we have a motion on the floor, right? And we have a second.
And we had a question.
If there are no additional questions or concerns that need to be shared, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor of moving forward with the disparity study, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we have one opposed, and did any abstain? Okay, so that motion carries. We will move forward with 12.5, and this is our action to approve renewal of student hotspots. I'm going to open the floor for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Yeager, a second by Dr. Maddox. Gonna open up the floor for comments or concerns. Also reminding us that if we would be sure that everyone has had a chance to ask their questions or share their comments and concerns, and to move efficiently. The floor is open for questions, comments, or concerns. Okay. All right. All in favor of approving renewal of student hotspots, if you would say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and any abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. We are now at items 12.6 and then 12.7. Dr. Thomas, I know this was something, there were several questions throughout the day. And so before I open the floor for a motion, are there any updates?
So we've attempted to answer the questions. I do just want to say that Ms. Jacqueline Bass, that was some of the conversation. and I had met with her over a month or so ago. She has provided very valuable feedback on her assessment, and she was a historic preservation architect. She provided very valuable feedback on her assessment of the West Broad properties. If we were to move forward, I will work with Mr. Fisher, Dr. Thomas, and Mr. Gilbert to ensure that all feasible interior recommendations are adhered to as much as possible as we move forward with any renovation. It is essential that we commit to preserving and or replicating as much as possible of our original structures in order to preserve the historical integrity. I did want to clarify, based on the questions that we received today, that the information presented last week was not a proposal to present a choice A or choice B. It was an information to share what the team looked at to vet our options. I think there was some confusion around that. We were asked at our fiscal accountability meeting to publicly share how we made a determination of what our recommendation would be to the board. And that was our attempt last week to do that. So showing A and B was showing this is what it would look like, and this is what the program would involve if we went with the 2 building. This is what it would look like if we went with the 3 building option. So it was not to say that tonight the vote would be on one or the other, because the recommendation that came last week was, again, not based on any personal preference of mine, but just based on the professional information I was given, was for the 2 building option. So that last week was our effort to be transparent in our decision-making process, how we assess each option, and how we got to where we are now. As I said last week, this is not at all a personal decision. I've had to remove my Athens native personal feelings and just look at recommendations from operations and the operational needs of the Early Head Start. We did speak to them. I shared that with the board today. We weren't able to speak to them until yesterday. We were told that 2 to 3 months is ideal. 4 months is kind of pushing it. Anything past that, we'll have to go through different layers of approval to get us an extension. And the only other information that I had to add was, and please correct me, Attorney Pruitt, when we looked at the Section 106 requirements of the National Historic Preservation Act, it is my understanding that if we were to use federal funds, i.e. the Early Head Start funds for construction, then it does fall under Section 106. In this case, we are using local SPLOST funds, and so that changes some of those requirements. Is that correct? Or can you say that better? Because that was what was told to me, but that didn't align with what was written by you, and so I wanted you to clarify that, because I took notes on what I was told, but those did not mesh.
So the National Historic Preservation Act is a federal law that applies to federal agencies. Section 106 requires those federal agencies to conduct historical review under certain circumstances if they're funding construction or possibly a program. The main point to take away is Clark County School District has no role in the decision of whether a Section 106 review occurs or not. That's determined by the funding federal agency, which in this case is the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. So DHHS determines, as a part of its grant-making process for this early learning center, whether a Section 106 historical preservation review should be conducted. It's my understanding, staff will correct me if I'm wrong, that DHHS has said they've determined that that is not a step to be taken in this particular project.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Thomas, any additional information, or was that it?
I think we have responded to all of the questions that we were asked today. The only other question that was posed related to what if we move forward with the first 2 buildings and then came back and renovated the Campbell Street building at a later time. So I'm assuming that that would then involve funds from SPLOST 6. And so if this is voted, depending on how the vote is today, then that would be further discussion for the board to have regarding having the timeline for that building staying on that property, not renovated while the other property is renovated.
Okay.
I'm trying to say that the correct way.
Okay.
So all of that discussion, the what next would just depend on the vote from today.
Okay.
Can
All
you
right.
repeat?
So
I don't think I understood that.
Yes, so someone asked, actually Mr. Davis asked the question of what if we went ahead and moved forward with the Minor Street building and the new addition, and then we were able to adhere to the timeline of the grant and we could go ahead and move in and then come back and do the Campbell Street building at a later date.
Right.
And so I was saying that that's not up for vote now, but if the vote is no for the 2 building, we will have to go back and have discussion of what, if anything, we want to do next with the property, and that would then, could be a part of the conversation at that point. And I really was just saying, so then it would just be a matter, not just a matter, but one consideration would be, do we want to have that building there? So it would still take from like green space, playground space, outdoor learning space, but all of those would be things we would discuss if we get to that point. But then would we want to have that building there not renovated and basically in the current state that it's in, while the remainder of the campus is renovated and being used for its new purpose? Does that make better? No?
So to make the decision tonight, that is off the table as a discussion, is what you're
Right.
saying.
Right now, the discussion is, the vote now is based on a 2 building recommendation. If that vote passes, we move forward. If that vote fails, we will go back to the drawing board and have further discussion about what next. And I think and so I was really just addressing from Dr. Gantz's question to me, the questions that came up today. And I think what Mr. Davis proposed may have been, I don't want to put words in your mouth, an effort to see if something could be done to support West Broad as well as supporting Cedar Shoals High School.
okay. All right. Ms. Davis, and then Mr. Davis, and then Dr. Yeager, did you? Okay. A motion is not on the floor. And
No.
so
I want to make sure that I'm clear. As written, this statement says, action to approve CM at-risk contract for Early Learning Center at West Broad. CM meaning construction management. What is the CM?
Construction manager.
Okay, so
Construction
this
management.
action to approve the construction management at-risk contract for Early Learning Center at West Broad is a vote to demolish the Campbell Street building. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what number 12.6 says?
In my understanding, 12.7 is the action to approve abatement and demolition contract. Is that correct?
What does 12.6 do for us? What are we voting for in 12.6?
12.6 allows us to hire the construction manager for the project. Is that right, Mr. Gilbert?
So hiring the construction manager is just hiring a person to go forward with whatever plan we ultimately decide? Yes. Okay, and so if we hire a construction manager and we don't have a plan, no, if we hire a construction manager and we don't vote for the plan, what do we do? That's what I'm asking, because I can see where 12.6, where you can hire a construction manager, but do we need to reverse these and start with 12.7?
They will still have to do work as far as getting bids and solicitations, whether we have a 2-building scheme or a 3-building scheme.
Okay.
So either way, the CM still needs to be on board to do that.
Okay, and so when we say at-risk contract, what do we mean by that?
They'll give us a guaranteed maximum price. It's not a hard bid job, so they'll actually put bid packages together themselves and solicit bids to give us a guaranteed maximum price. And that way, they'll base it off of a total contract amount versus a hard bid amount, because we haven't solicited those bids.
Okay, and so a contract manager for this particular work right now, we're making an assumption that and again, it's a temporary thing. We're assuming that the work for doing 12-7 is so closely related to, if we said no to 12-7 and went for that 3-building solution, would that same contract manager be doing that work as well?
Yes, we would assign the demolition contract to him.
Uh-huh.
So, if we approve 12-7, then he would be overseeing and supervising the abatement and demolition for the site.
So is this somebody that, is this one of these contracts where we already have people that we use to do this work and we just be giving this contract to them, or is this going to be a bid out contract?
No, it was bid. They were both bid. The CM at risk and the demolition were both bid separately.
So we already have a bid out?
Yes, we have,
we've selected that person.
Yeah, we've selected them, and that's based off the recommendation here on both of them.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay.
I'm
Three
good.
documents at the bottom.
All right, so I just want to be clear that 12-6 is an action to just hire the contractor, and it is not dependent on 12-7. That has to happen whether we do 12-7 or not.
Correct.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, Dr. Gant. So what if, not saying I'm doing this, but I just now need clarity. What if I'm not me and I decide not to bring back a recommendation for the 3 and we've hired someone?
Well, we just would, if we hired a CM at risk and we decide we're not going to do the project, we would just, negate that contract.
I just wanted to be sure.
So the CM at risk is a construction company.
Right.
Speak up.
Yeah. It's important because we have other people watching, and for accessibility, our sign language professionals can't always hear, even if we can hear ourselves.
The CM at risk is a construction company. What CM at risk means, it's a different delivery method of construction. It's one that the districts use many times, probably more often than not. But the old delivery method was design, bid, build. You hire an architect first, they design a building, then the architect puts out bids, GCs, general contractors, and you select the GC to do it. The CM at risk does all of that. The CM at risk construction company that's selected and attached to your agenda item or the bid tabulations. So there is one of those that's being recommended, and that would be the motion to be made. So that CM at risk will procure the architectural and engineering services and all of that, work with the district staff to come up with the specific plans, then put it out for bid, then or work up the costs, make a guaranteed maximum price proposal. They come to you with that. Presumably you approve that and go forward. If you don't approve that guaranteed maximum price proposal, you can terminate at that point. There's still a contractual obligation to the CM at risk for that work they've done to get to that point. Did I state that right?
So they're really like the big program managers, to make the thing work. Okay, I'm so sorry that maybe at one time when I read it, it was clear to me, but for whatever reason, those words just jumped out at me tonight, and I apologize if this is ground that we've already covered.
Okay, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, along the same lines, when it says with 12.6 what the scope of the work is, I can ignore that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's because it's fairly specific about we're hiring the CM to do this work, and part of that work is the destruction of the Campbell Street building. So can I ignore all that background and say, well, if we don't support 12.7, then we can just reword and we pass 12.6, then all that background stuff is moot.
Right. The CM has not bid the demolition contract, so they would not, begin the actual demolition until they either rebid it or we approve 12.7.
I'm a lot clearer, thank you.
All right. Additional questions?
Procedurally, is it possible to move the order to vote on 12.6 after 12.7? Or is that a no-go since we've already adopted the agenda?
Mr. Pruitt, could you clarify? That would mean that we would need to do that right now, or it would be an amending of the agenda? Or you can nod your head yes, and I can repeat it, or no. So,
I think the point there, God correct me if I'm wrong, is that seeing the risk, because the district can go forward with a plan once the seeing the risk is higher, regardless of how you vote on 12.7. If you vote no on 12.7, that obviously restricts the possibilities, right? But you still work with the general contractor to make a plan in light of the fact that not going on. Is that correct?
I move that we approve 12.6.
all right, we have a motion on the floor to approve 12.6. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion about approving 12.6?
I've just got one more question because I'm going to vote for it. But would that, by voting for 12.6, does that give the superintendent more flexibility to move immediately into another direction if she chooses? Or it doesn't make any difference?
I'm not quite sure what that means.
I mean, if we have hired a contractor, right? Then, and we've hired that contractor to do certain work on a certain piece of property, then to me, that's stage one. But
yeah, I mean, how this works is, so once the CM at risk is hired, again, administration and staff work with the CM at risk to put together the specifics of the project, the design, and put together the costs of implementing that design. And that comes back to you for approval in the form of a guaranteed maximum price. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. A second.
I do have discussion.
Okay.
I have a comment. It's my understanding that I understand what we're doing and what the CM is, but there is the possibility that the superintendent won't come back with a recommendation. There's no requirement that she does. And my understanding is we would still be under a contractual obligation to pay for this money. And so I want to put that out there for consideration. And if I am wrong, Mr. Pruitt, please correct me, but there's no requirement that a recommendation be made at all.
Well, sorry about that. So the district's made a contractual commitment once you approve this with the CM at risk to work with the CM at risk to put together a design and a cost and bring it back as a GMP. And then again, you reject, if you reject it and you can't negotiate to anything you want to go forward with, then you owe the CM at risk for those services performed at that point.
All right. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. All right, all in favor of approving the CM at risk contract for the Early Learning Center, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same sign.
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Palmer, did you? Did you get that? Okay. The noes, who were the noes? Okay. Okay, and none abstaining, correct. Okay. All right. So that motion passes.
Did
We'll
we
move.
need a, did we need a majority or did we need a quorum?
It's 5-4.
A majority.
I'm asking Mr. Pruitt.
Yeah, that's just a simple majority vote. There's no super majority requirement.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move forward to 12.7. And this is the action to approve abatement and demolition, the demolition contract for the Early Learning Center at West Broad. The floor is open. Ms.
Is
David?
this for questions? Oh.
It was for a motion, but if there are questions, we can do that during the discussion, or if you have some questions that Dr. Thomas can answer.
I just had one question. Is that okay to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is a discussion now? Okay, so just the one. So a few minutes ago, you said that if this motion is not approved and we have to go back to the drawing table, that one of the options on the table is to move forward with construction of the two buildings and leave the one for now, and Early Head Start still gets to move in on time with no further delays. They still get to move in May.
No.
So
That's one option that will be on the table. is what I'm
that's
saying.
something that we will, yes, so that was a option that was presented to us today for consideration. So that is something that we could consider, yes.
So then there are some possible ways to navigate doing this where both sides get what they need.
Yeah, yes, there are ways to navigate this so both sides get what they need. So the question would be, and I'm not at all saying this is my plan, I just want to look at all sides. So then the question would be with the team, with Ms. Higginbotham's group. So is the value add of keeping the building greater than the loss of outdoor classrooms, play space, other? And I'm not saying that I agree or disagree. I'm not taking a position. I'm just saying that those would be things that we would have conversation about. I don't want to say commit now because we need to go back and have that discussion, but that would be part of the discussion, yes. Is
So
that?
now I'm confused.
Does that make sense?
And so to be clear, because that's a discussion does not mean that that will be the recommendation.
Right, that's what
Okay.
I'm trying to say. So there are a lot of things that will be able to be discussed, from do nothing and sell it all to the highest bidder to how do we make it work? You know what I mean? I mean, there can be a range of discussions. I mean, I've had that brought up to me just as well. So I'm not saying at all that that's my position. I'm just saying that there will be a range of discussions. So, and one is what was brought up today as a possibility.
Okay. Ms. Davis, Dr. Yeager, and then Mr. Davis.
So before we had that discussion on 12.6, I thought I clearly heard that the only recommendation that you're bringing forward tonight is the two building plan, which is the demolition of the Campbell Street building. This conversation just took me to a place that said we're no longer talking about the demolition of the Campbell Street building. We're talking about some way to try and have more discussion about the three building option. I'm confused. What are we voting for in 12.7?
The recommendation from me is that we move forward with the two building option.
And that's what
Period.
12.7 means, just
Yes,
that.
yes. The reason the other discussions are coming up is because of all the discussion that today has taken place via email, conversations, board members, suggestions, recommendations, and I think just the natural human instinct to say, what if?
And so that then only happens if we get a no vote on 12.7.
That is right. And that was what I said a few minutes ago, that all of that is contingent
I'm up to speed now.
upon
Thank you.
to no vote. Yes. So nothing can happen
Right.
until we take this vote.
I just want to make sure that we clearly understand what 12.7 is saying.
12.7 is voting on whether or not we agree to the two building concept. If not, then we go back and decide what next.
Okay. Dr. Yeager and then Mr. Davis.
I was just going to say, we have been discussing this for 2 years at least. My first time on the board, we discussed this and voted on this. We've been discussing it a really long time, and we just saw some data that shows that our babies can't wait. We've got a lot of kids that need early learning, and we need it today, not 2 more years from now. So I'm going to vote yes on this, and I move that we approve 12.7.
Okay. All right. So we have let me go to Mr. Davis and we'll come back around for your motion. Okay. All right. Well, is there a second?
I'm gonna have to give a second. And this is very hard. I haven't even been able to focus on the meeting tonight. But this is, first of all, this goes way beyond the Campbell Street building. If we were to be honest as a community, and I've been very quiet for a long time, it's been very traumatic for me from going back a few years ago when we had the opportunity to partner, and it happens to be my employer, but it doesn't matter because I worked and volunteered with Athens Land Trust long before I even joined the board. But the same people that I volunteered with, that I worked at that community garden with, were people in this very community. They changed their mind, and then all of a sudden, we don't want to work with anybody. We don't want to work with a community group. We want our school. But in no time did I see anyone come up, historic Tommy, disrespect, but where's the money? And as a school board, it is our responsibility to be about children first. And I'm at peace with this. I had to pray about this, meditate, and all that. I respect my elders in this community. I love everybody who came up today. But if we are truly going to start working better as a community, when we talk about preservation of anything, it don't start right now. Let's be truthful. Those buildings set in that condition, and this community with residents who spoke last week and shared that they were in support of what's going on. And we keep ignoring that, the people who live here, who stayed in this community. That building stayed vacant for those buildings for at least 5 years. Dr. New came in, asked Athens Land Trust to do a farmer's market based on community meetings. Beautiful. The land redone, community gardens. People in the community had the opportunity to sell stuff. We had many of the people. My own uncle that's out there spoke at several of the events, Juneteenth, West Broad Day. And I'm all about community. I'm not all about this foolishness. History is great. I'm for history. I'm about everything. My uncle right there, he taught me a lot. Starting the Black History Bowl. I mean, I'm all about that. But we get this building, look at it with all these pictures. Do we have educational tours coming through here? Are we educating our children? We keep talking about history. It's more than just talking about the Campbell School building. We signed up to be on this board to be about the children in this district. History is very important. It breaks my heart to say that we need to do what we have to do to make sure that our babies have an opportunity. Looking at that data, something rose in me that let me know for confirmation that what I was thinking was on point. Our children need those buildings. They need that space. Because if we don't do that and we have to start back over at the drawing board, who's to say that we might not even be able to do it because we can't have that building there for whatever it might be used for? So we have to think bigger than just ourselves. I want us to have a historical marker. I wish that we could keep that building. But it is time to end this saga. It's time to end this. What about the Reed Street building? What about the VFW building over there? Tell me that y'all was supposed to be renovating by Greater Bethel. Where's that? What's going on over that? So I don't want to have to go there tonight, but it's time out for this. I'm all about my babies. And so I'm going to gladly second that motion.
Thank you. There was a question, I think, Mr. Davis, or a comment my Mr. Davis, and Miss Hall, and then we'll circle back around to Miss Davis if no one else has questions. I want to be sure everybody gets a chance to speak once. Well, twice, but that we've gone through the rounds once.
Let me say, and I say this to my esteemed coworker, Dr. Maddox, my esteemed coworker, Dr. Yeager. I mean, we have been working on this issue for a long time. And I had resolved myself up until the last week, really, to feel the same way that you did, Dr. Maddox. What to me has come to light and what really surprised me is that after all the years of discussion about the West Broad property, it wasn't until last week that I saw a rendition that saved the Campbell Street building. Now, was it perfect? No. There were flaws in it. But the fact is that that's the first time I ever saw that. That up until that time, and I'm not just talking about discussions we've had here, but discussions that we've had with the COC, Dr. Yeager, for month after month after month. And I remember personal conversations that I've had with John Gilbert about the impossibility of saving the Campbell Street building and having early learning there. It is possible, and that's why I voted for the contractor, because we need to do something with that property for our kids. Now, once before, I'm not even going to go into the past, because there were things that were said in the past that proved to be untrue. And I won't even go there. This is another administration. This is a while back in terms of the use of that building and what it was needed for and that type of thing. There is one thing that I do want to mention, because there were people tonight who somehow or the other saw this in terms of reestablishing or renovating the Campbell Street building as somehow or the other interfering with the
Cedar Shoals.
Yeah, Cedar Shoals. I went back to my COC agendas just a few minutes ago, and that wasn't even on the agenda until May of this year. And the only reason it's there now is because we have gone beyond what was expected from the SPLOST money. And I know, and I agree with some of our speakers tonight about the inequality between Cedar Shoals and Clark Central. But this board voted, and the reason we made a conscious effort to do two things. One is we wanted an 8-lane track. And we were told the best way to get that was to do it at Clark Central. So we spent extra money. And also Clark Central said, we want a artificial turf. And so those were Clark Central decisions, but our decision in terms of the 8-lane track that spent over $5 million for Clark Central. Yes, we did spend money in Clark Central. Cedar Shoals in terms of renovating the track and also the locker room, but it did not come to $5.5 million. It came to, I think, $1.5 million or something like that. So yes, they owe that field house, but that field house was not even. It was not from going back to the COC minutes. It wasn't even on the agenda. until May of 2021. So, you know, I will, in terms of, and I've told the board this, you know, if there were going to be some type of, if to bring back the historic aspects of the Campbell Street building along with the Minor Street building, and I do appreciate what Dr. Thomas said about maintaining the integrity as Ms. Bass, the architect, described. But if it's a cost, I'd say let's go to the community. I've already promised. I promised $1,000 into the pot to save the Campbell Street building for renovation, and I mean it. And I think there are people in the community who would be willing to help out if that was the issue. But the bottom line is early learning needs to be in there in May. And I have every confidence, and I am not going to box Dr. Thomas into a corner. And I ask for no pleasures on her part. But I think there will be, I am fully confident that there will be early learning in May over in that site.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Hull, and then Ms. Davis.
So I think as board members, when we ask our community members not to make personal attacks, we have to show them that same courtesy. So calling Tommy out, that wasn't cool, we shouldn't do that as board members. I think as a new board member, wait, let me finish. I think as a new board member, my understanding is our responsibility is to the children. And I don't think we can make important decisions without being informed and having all of the information. And I had decided in my mind which way this vote would go. And then I heard from the community, and then so much information that I had never seen before, never heard before. So many different options came out that we have not had time to process and explore. So I think it will be hugely so irresponsible of us to say, yes, this is the one option we had, because people are tired of talking about it. We need all of the information. I think that the information should have been presented a whole lot sooner to the board to have that information. And we do need to have those discussions, because this does not have to be a zero-sum game where we have an either or, but there are ways to look at interest, because that's what we want to teach our children to do. There are ways to come to the table collaboratively and solve the problem so that everybody can win. And I think that is how we show up for our children, and that is how we run this district to get out of this mess.
Thank you. Was it Ms. Davis? But let me just be sure. Ms. Gallagher and Dr. Dykeman, do you all have any comments before we start our second round of? No, we're still on the first one, and I want to be sure before we go back to Ms. Davis that that everyone has spoken who wants to speak during this first round.
Okay, I can go. So this decision has been very difficult, I think, for all of us, and weighing sort of the historical aspect, which is obviously important, but then also weighing the impact on children who will be served by the Early Learning Center. And yes, a lot of it is influenced by the history of how this has gone. And we did talk about this and vote on this 2 years ago to this month. And there has not been anything that we voted to move forward with an Early Learning Center, and nothing has happened in 2 years. So I am concerned that if we don't move forward with it now, we're just pushing it, and we're not, it's going to sit again with nothing going on that property. So that's one consideration. It is the case that you can make anything work if you throw enough money at it. So yes, it is possible that we could renovate the Campbell Street building and use it for early learning. It's probably even possible, if we threw enough money at it, to renovate the third building and use that as well. Is that the best use of our money? I don't think so. I think that this is going to take money from another project. Maybe it's not Cedar Shoals, but if we have to spend more money, it has to come from somewhere. We did ask Dr. Thomas for consideration to consider a couple months ago, is it possible to do more historic preservation? And she took that on and she said, this is important enough that I want to investigate this further. And I will engage with a new historic preservation architect, and I will try to come up with, listen and try to come up with the best solution. And so she did do that, and she came up with this recommendation. And we met last week with community members who had good questions, and we had good discussion, and people in the community want an early learning center for children age 0 to 3 or up to 4 for pre-K if pre-K fits in there. So while it is difficult, I think for me it is, I think another solution might work. I don't know. I know that it would cost more money, and I know it would cost more time, and I know that it would end up with less outdoor play area and less space for the children who will be there. So for me, given all of that, and that Dr. Thomas took this time and extra consideration and came up with this recommendation, then I will vote for this recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dykeman. Ms. Gallagher, did you have any thoughts?
Sure.
Okay, and then we'll go start back with Ms. Davis.
Okay, so I do want to echo everything Nicole said or Attorney Hall said.
Can you speak in your mic a little bit or more?
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Good. So I do want to echo everything Attorney Hall said. But I think for me, it's just a little bit different because I'm thinking more about the students that can be served. And 128 kids for a massive project just does not feel right for me. We're not serving enough kids. Like we did Clark Central, that between 12 and 1,500 kids. We did Barrow, they got like up to like 500 kids, and Chase up to like 500 kids. But we're gonna approve a massive amount of work for 128 kids. That kind of bothers me. And expanding the use of the buildings, like I get like community use. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying like for kids, if we're only doing, so, and this is just me talking. So I have 1, 2, and 3-year-olds that come to me. I do childcare. I think that providing a safe place for kids who are at a higher risk is very important. But at this point, we aren't actually doing education. We don't have much of anything else figured out, and we can see that with our data. But putting a whole bunch of construction into a building that we're going to use for what amounts to childcare, I think is a waste of money. If we're going to use it for education, then that's what we need to be doing. But we don't have any data saying that what we currently have is actually working. We don't have any data that's saying that we are actually improving outcomes for kids. We don't have any data that says that a Clark County School District is actively doing all that it can to make sure that our children are not just college and career ready, but life ready. So voting yes on a project that is so big that does not actively address the need, like the true need, not just a safe place for kids to go during the day so that they can eat lunch. I think that's a disservice to all the children. We got to figure out a way to make sure that it used to be served for older kids. I think we need to figure out a way to create alternative spaces for kids because our traditional classrooms aren't working. Our traditional schools are not working. So if we had an alternative way to address the academic disparities or behavior, like anything else, I could vote yes, because then we'd be serving more kids. But 128, mm-mm.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Ms. Davis?
And I don't quite know how to start, but I want to first of all state that I am absolutely in favor of preservation of a history and a heritage that is clearly being erased across, has been erased in Athens, Clarke County, and this is our last opportunity to continue to save that. As it relates to the space, it is absolutely a critical part of certainly my heritage, and most of you are much younger than me. So I did get to go to school in Athens, Clarke County during that segregated time. It is critical that not a single school that I attended is still in existence. We sold North Athens to the county several years ago. I was a part of the board that did that. I was a part of the board when we first started with the West Broad study, the initiative to say, what can the school district do in this corridor to help bring this piece of land up? And that's where this all began 9 years ago. And so this has been an ongoing saga. And what has happened for me is that in every single conversation, there is a narrative that has been pushed. And so the voices in the community that say, preserve our history, preserve our heritage, are the ones that are not heard. I heard that very clearly tonight. I've heard that clearly. Oh, my phone has been ringing, and it's nice to know that people can find me. And I have heard it from people that I visit in this community. West Broad is an institution, and it needs to be honored, and it needs to be saved, and it needs to be protected. The fact that we have not asked, what does it take to actually save all three buildings and give early learning space here, and not have to completely repurpose it for any other use, is part of my dilemma. I think there are so many beautiful buildings, so many restorations that I've visited in my travels where I've seen miracles, it looks like, in terms of what people can do to transform space. I don't think we have enough imagination in this solution that we're being presented. And I, again, would like for us to, again, when we're doing preservation, we use preservationists to do that work. That's what they do. And then when we are looking at the early learning, and again, I am all in favor of early learning. And so 128 is how many? And our unmet need in this county was 7,000. And we're going to spend $10 million on 128 when we've got 7,000 unmet need. Is there a better, more creative way that we can spend that money to get more access for more kids to early learning? Those are questions that I would want this board and this district to have with the community. There are some opportunities here to make this better. More than anything, I want to also bring our attention to the fact that the building matters, the space matters, and whatever piece of the past we can preserve matters, especially now. I don't think money is an object here because we have the funds that have already been earmarked for this renovation. I think to speculate that it would cost more is pure speculation, and I don't even want to make a decision based on what I think. I think we have experts that we can hire to give us that information, and we should have that information to make an informed decision. I think, again, if we look at the facts of what we have, I am at that place where I really would like to make a substitute motion, if I am in order to do so, and have us look at a 3-building solution as a possibility for, as a way forward for doing the renovation at West Broad. And I'll try and close it there because I'm getting emotional about this. Thank you.
All right, we have a substitute motion for a recommendation to explore 3 building options. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry, is that something that we can do? Doesn't that recommendation have to come from the superintendent?
It should.
That's what I thought. I thought it was supposed to come from me.
What I have is that the motion is to explore 3 building options.
That is in lieu of the action to approve abatement and demolition contract.
Yeah, the motion that is already on the floor by Dr. Yeager and Dr. Maddox. So we have a substitute motion for the district or the superintendent to explore. Um,
I'm sorry, I cannot get into this board superintendent fight again. You know, y'all,
I mean, it was
you've
my
you've had
understanding.
Cognia here, you've all been through this, you've had your training, you know, make your decision.
okay, so let me see if I can bring some professionalism back to our meeting. We have a motion on the floor. We have a question that's been asked. And in the absence of any response, we still have a motion on the floor. So we have your motion on the floor for the superintendent to explore 3 building options. My interpretation is that doesn't necessarily mean to come back or to recommend, but to explore those options. And we have a second on the floor. What we don't have is clarity over the degree to which this falls in line with Robert's rule or governance. So the motion is on the floor. Is there any discussion about the
Madam President,
motion?
may I clarify? It's not. No. It's not a matter of Robert's rules or any sort of law that I can weigh in on. This business of what is the relationship between the superintendent and the board is purely a matter of governance as it's dictated by Cognia. And that's why I made the response I did. I cannot give you a legal opinion on that because it's not a legal matter. It's for
Okay.
the board in each board member in the exercise of his or her discretion to determine if that substitute motion is in line with all of the training you've received.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So we have a motion on the floor, again, to explore the 3 building option. We have a second. Is there any discussion about this substitute motion? I will say in lieu of that, um, I think that related to the motion that's on the substitute motion that's on the floor. I do think it gets very close to crossing a line. Um, if we want to decide the options, then to me, my interpretation is that is outside of our role. Now, if we've been asked to collaborate to attend future meetings, depending on the result of this vote by the superintendent or just simply sharing ideas, I think that's one thing. But I do think this motion gets very close to telling the superintendent what the motion will be from a governance standpoint. So those are my thoughts about the current substitute motion, but I welcome any other thoughts and discussion about the substitute motion that's on the floor.
I agree with you. If this is an area where the superintendent made this recommendation, it seems as though we just voted. And then if it's voted down, then we go back to the drawing board. It just seems like that is going above the line to have that motion.
I agree. I think that she made a recommendation and we have to take a vote on it. And then whatever happens after that vote, I guess we can decide. But I think that it's on the agenda and she made the recommendation. We had a motion and a second, and I think we have to vote on it.
Okay, so as it stands, Ms. Davis, was your hand raised?
Yes, my hand is raised. And so again, we were presented in the community presentation last week, a 2 building option and a 3 building option. Having been presented that 3 building option, saying that it is possible to save that building, I do not understand why we would not have been given the choice, if it's already been explored, that we had some opportunity here to do that. If that was not even a possibility, I do not understand why we spent an hour and a half presenting a 3 building option in contrast to the 2 building recommendation that is being brought forward.
Okay.
I will gladly withdraw is it too late to withdraw my motion for the substitute? And let's go ahead and vote on this particular item that you have. And my concern is in doing this vote at item 12.7 as written, You don't have an alternative. You're just simply saying, go hire somebody, but we don't have a plan for you to work for because we don't agree with the plan that you're putting forward if that vote fails. I was simply making the substitute motion to give us a direction that we can start in. So, and I don't think asking to explore is in any way crossing the line since this is our employee.
Okay, does the motion stand, or are you withdrawing the substitute motion? Okay, all right. All in favor of this substitute motion for the superintendent to explore 3 building options, if you would show by raising your hands and saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, is that Ms. Davis and Mr. Davis? All right, all opposed, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any abstaining? Okay, we have one person that's abstaining. Ms. Palmer, can you give us the counts on those if that substitute motion passed or failed? Okay. All right, so that substitute motion fails. We're back at the original motion that was made by Dr. Yeager and Maddox, which is to take action to approve the abatement and demolition contract for the Early Learning Center. Okay. If there are no more questions or discussion, Mr. Davis, can you make it quick?
Yes, I'll make it quick. This is in response to something that Dr. Dykeman raised. And it was raised also by Dr. Maddox. The September 12th, 2019 vote to move ahead with the demolition of the Campbell Street building if was based on false information. Mm-hmm. It was based on what we were told, that there was a waiting list of pre-K students who would not be served otherwise. It was only under the leadership of Dr. Thomas did we find out that in actuality, it was a waiting list of people who wanted their first choice in terms of where to attend pre-K. That is my explanation as to why nothing has been done since September 12, 2019, because the actual purpose of it was not needed. Now we do have a need. We have a grant. We want the grant. Contrary to my esteemed colleague here, I think it's very necessary. But I think that we need to be clear about where the history of that vote came from, because we were in a very similar situation but in that case it was not real.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
sorry.
So let me bring us to a close. Dr. Dykeman, and did you have Ms. Davis, and Dr. Maddox, and then we're going to take a vote because it is 9:30, and these same agenda items were on our agenda last week. So vote up or down, but we need to move forward. Okay.
I just want to respond to 2 things that were said in response to what I said. So we did have a waiting list 2 years ago as well. It may be what you're saying about pre-K is true, that maybe the waiting list for pre-K wasn't for any pre-K spot. It was waiting list for individual schools, but there has always been a waiting list for these early Head Start spots. So that is still the case and was the case 2 years ago. And then in response to something that Ms. Davis said about the cost and not knowing the cost, last week in the meeting when the 3 building option was presented, it was presented that it would cost an estimate of $3.6 million more than the 2 building options. So when I said that it would be more expensive, that is where that information came from. And finally, with regard to what Ms. Gallagher was talking about, like, do we want to spend this much money for serving this number of students? I get that. I do. I think if the idea is that we don't want to use it for an early learning center, then I think that that's a possibility to explore. But we have committed to an early learning center, and if we're going to build an early learning center, I want to build it in the best possible way for the children that are going to be served by the early learning center.
All right, thank you. Ms. Davis? All right. So we have a motion, Dr. Maddox.
First of all, my emotions did get the best of me, tonight, because this has been a lot, and I do extend grace when there have been plenty of us, even tonight, that have done things. So I just appreciate the same grace. But we did vote on this in 2019, and I guess the thing that really disturbs me is that from that time period, I didn't see an organization coming up, and there was nothing said. And then now, well, we got the money, we have a plan, and now it's like it's all this conversation, and I just think that that's just not fair to the children. And so, Mr. Valentine, I do love you, you know, and I apologize, for saying that out loud. Okay, I meant it though, but I apologize. I should not have said that. And whatever I said, because I'm gonna tell you, I don't even remember because I went to another place, and that's honest to God. So whatever I said and whoever I said it to, I apologize. But my heart has always been with children, and if you really know me, I go hard when it comes to my babies. And I just want us to move forward with this and get back to student achievement. There's been too many years of us worrying and doing about everything else except for our children. And so, that's all I have to say. I just wanted to make sure I apologize to whoever and whatever I said.
Can I?
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry, Dr. Anderson.
So I just keep hearing this over and over that it is all about the kids, and my whole platform was early childhood education, and it is all about the kids. But there's also a point to which, for the last 3+ years, the information that this board has been using to make these decisions was not transparent. And so if we're voting on things without all of the information presented to us, then those votes are essentially, in my mind, null and void. Once you do get the correct information and you go back to the drawing table and you figure out how to make it work better the next time around. And that's what I'm trying to do. And that's what I'm trying to encourage us to do as a board, because I do believe that it is all about the kids. But when I hear that there are options for us to do this both ways and still open that early Head Start building on time and get those kids in that building, I don't understand why we can't support both of these decisions. Save our history in this county, our African American. Both of my parents are from Africa. So I'm a first generation African American. If it were not for those types of histories being taught to me, I wouldn't understand what is important for you all that I should be getting as a first generation African American. My experience would be different, and I wouldn't understand your experience and your history and your struggle and your plight. So I wouldn't see eye to eye with you. But having that history and knowing it is what makes us all globally understand what it means to be Black in this country. And if we're tearing it down and not even giving it consideration when there's an opportunity for us to do both of these things the right way, why wouldn't we take that? Why wouldn't we do it? I just don't. The information that we had before was not right. So those decisions should not be something that we should be brought to bear today.
All right.
I was just going to say, Dr. Thomas had all that information, and she's giving us her best recommendation after a lot of thought. And so my vote is depending a lot on her recommendation. I'm not the one who's choosing. I'm listening to the person who has met with and talked to and listened to and thought about this issue for a while. So that's why I'm voting what I'm voting.
So I called for
Okay.
a point of order, and I thought that meant that we would now go ahead and take our vote, and that all conversation ceases and we get back to the matter at hand.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis. All right, just for the record, I noticed that Ms. Gallagher, myself, Dr. Anderson just spoke, and Ms. Hall, just, okay. All right, all in favor of taking action on 12-7, and this is the action to approve the abatement and demolition contract for Early Learning Center. If you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. And all opposed, if you would raise your hands and say aye as well.
Aye.
All right. And any abstaining?
All 9 votes.
Okay, that was that. Okay, what was that final count? Okay. 4-5. Okay, so that motion did not pass. All right. Okay, thank you. We'll move forward to item 12-8. This is our action to approve the vaccine incentive.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. There wasn't any additional updates from last week, Dr. Thomas, is that correct? Okay. Okay. All right. Any follow-up questions or discussion? All in favor of the action to approve the vaccine incentive, if you would show by raising your hands and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We have one opposed and, oh, I'm sorry.
So that's 2.
Okay, 2 opposed. And then were there any abstaining? Okay, so that should be 7-2. That motion carries. We'll move forward to item 13, and this is adjournment. The floor is open.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, we're adjourned at 9:42. Thank you.